Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you back for more RPG talk, as is our way over here. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend. Spring is full and fledgely here. It's been very nice last couple of days. A little hint of thunderstorms. Crazily, completely unrelatedly, it does make me think a lot of Mouse Guard, the role-playing game, just because there's such a focus in this game on seasons, which we'll talk about. Anyways, welcome, everyone. Glad to have you here. So the last couple of weeks, or maybe even the last month or so, of course, we're having our polls over on the Knights of Last Call Discord, where only our patrons are members. And one of the things that has been coming up but never actually getting first place has been the game Mouse Guard. And it's a personal favorite of mine. It's my channel, so sometimes I get to pick. So tonight I decided to go with Mouse Guard, the role-playing game. And we're going to take a deep dive, is what I call it. Will we cover everything? I don't necessarily know, but this isn't a first look. Right. This is a game I have played before. This is a game I'm very familiar with. So while I may not necessarily have every rule memorized, like I don't know that there's any game that I have every rule memorized. But the last time I've had an active Mouse Guard campaign was quite some time ago. So I should say the last time I played Mouse Guard was quite some time ago. But nonetheless, if you have questions about the game, about the system, I'm okay jumping around a little bit. It's not really, the goal here is to kind of break down the mechanics. It's to do, that's what our channel's about, right? It's not 10 minutes to give you the 100,000 foot view. We're live for 2 hours or more, breaking down the mechanics and really digging into the meat of it, and potentially, talking about the implications of these mechanics. It's always certainly a big part of our first looks, but I think it's also a really important part of our deep dives as well. It's not just about learning new mechanics for a game. It's understanding like the context in which those mechanics are used and what goal are they trying to bring. As we've said before on this channel, every time you introduce a new rule or a new mechanic into a role-playing game, any game, you're increasing the complexity. You're increasing the potential complication of the game. You're asking more of the players. It's more things to do, more things to remember, more things to fiddle with. There are costs. It could slow down your game. It could make your game seem unappealing or difficult to get into. It can lead to analysis paralysis and just a bunch of other stuff. And so, long story short, mechanics come with a cost. And so the question of course, the big question that we always say here is the juice worth the squeeze? Are you getting what you want out of those mechanics? And quite frankly, sometimes the mechanics are doing a fantastic job. They take some effort, they take some work, but maybe it's not worth it to you because maybe the effect of those mechanics is something that you aren't personally interested in. Hey, starting us off right. We got a super chat from Bendril Nelson. Thank you, Bendril. First time live. Wonderful. Welcome. Glad to have you here. What a nice way to kick it off. I appreciate you. Been loving this community since I found out about a month ago. Fantastic. Awesome. Love Mouse Guard. It was my first exposure as a kid to other systems. What a great system to have as your first exposure to other RPG systems. Yeah. Mouse Guard, comes from this obviously legacy that is Burning Wheel. And we've discussed Burning Wheel many times on this channel, never in full detail. And of course, Burning Wheel has arguably either the greatest or the worst RPG system of all time, probably both. When we talk about complexity and we talk about the juice and the squeeze, everything that Luke Crane put into Burning Wheel is, in a sense, echoed in Mouse Guard. There's definitely elements of Burning Wheel. I hesitate to call Mouse Guard Burning Wheel light, but it's kind of Burning Wheel light. So a lot of the same principles and ideas from Burning Wheel carry over into Mouse Guard. So I think that is really interesting. But anyways, welcome, Bendril. Glad to have you here. Let's do some other quick shout outs. By the way, if you want to be cool like Bendril and you want to support the channel, feel free to drop a super chat or a super sticker. Or, of course, you could head over to our Stream Elements tip page. You can find a link for that in the description below. Or you can type !tip, and that'll give you that. But, of course, the best way to support the channel is to join the Patreon if you're not already done. If you've not already done so, link in the description below, patreon.com/nightstlastcall. Not only is that just makes me happiest because it's bringing you into our community. It also, for your sake, gives you access to a lot of exclusive options and perks that only are available to our patrons. Why, in fact, just yesterday, that's right, on a Monday evening, we had 4 different community games going. I'm not even sure what all of them were. I think one was Dragonbane, one was one might have been Pendragon. I'm not sure. I don't even know what the other 2 were. I'd have to check the calendar. Now, you know what? Now I've gotten myself curious. Let me take a look. Let me go to my community. We've got a whole schedule, big calendar. It's a whole thing. It really is a whole thing. All right. So yesterday on the Knights of Last Call Patreon, okay, we had Dragonbane. We had 2 Dragonbane games. We had Dragonbane Ruins Reach, and then we had Dragonbane Both Tiles Load. Then we had a 4th edition D&D session. Then we had a Hackmaster game. That's right, Hackmaster. And we had Masks from Magpie Game. So we had a PBTA game, a Hackmaster game, a Dragonbane game, a 4th edition game, 2 Dragonbane games. Crazy. Awesome. Love it. Amazing. Very proud of this community. Just thrilled to be part of it. Just even be part of it. So anyways, Dan says, why you got to be doing the last hour of my workday dirty? Sorry, Dan. Jordan, one of my all-time favorite RPGs. Fantastic. Cool. Jackal. What's up, Jackal? Good to see you here. I'd like to get better video watching, says Michael, but I have 5 successes and no failures. You got to try something hard. Go after something with a high ob. Exactly. Dan says it best. Sorrel, hola to you as well. Yes, the diegetic progression. Mark, of course, lambasting us for our subpar titles and our subpar thumbnails. I'm so sorry. What's up, Rule of Cool? What's up, Rokos? Sail away. Awesome to see you here as well. To date, says Jordan, I've only run this for 2nd graders. I may have made the neighbor girl cry when her mouse got sick after getting stuck sailing a pond in the rain. It does happen. Sean Nicholson, what's up? What's up? Mike, hello. Oh, Callimachus, absolutely. Plus, I'm just talking about the games of traditional role-playing games. We also have our play-by-post games, which are going every single day. Sup KC. Yes. Ruins Reach, Dragonbane represent. Yeah, Dragonbane has obviously become, definitely one of the darlings of our entire channel. So there's usually not a problem finding a Dragonbane game. I think there's at least 4 or 5 different Dragonbane campaigns going on right now. Yes, indeed. I want to fight an owl like it's a dragon. Well, thank you everybody for showing up here. And again, I need to put on one of my animal outfits. We may have lost those in the move. And by the way, if you remember, I never had to put on, we never achieved that tip goal. So we never had to, I never had to put on a costume. That was like the final tip goal, was to make Derek wear one. I'll embarrass all the rest of my players, but the money had to be there for me to suffer through that. All right. So, as I said before, if you have any questions, put them in chat. I'll try to answer them. Super chats and tips, I will definitely stop what I'm doing to make sure we answer those right away. And additionally, if you are interested in picking up this game, we have a link in the description below. Take you over to Drive-Thru RPG. It's our affiliate link, so it doesn't cost you any extra money, but I do get maybe like $1, which I use to buy PDFs like this one for a game I already own. All right. Mouse Guard, role-playing game. So let's start off with the elephant, or I guess the mouse in the room. This is a game, an RPG game, that uses a very stripped down, highly focused sort of version of the Burning Wheel game system. And it is set in the world of Mouse Guard, which is a comic book or an illustrated book by David Peterson. And it is about mice. And while they are slightly anthropomorphic, in the sense that they obviously are wearing belts and carrying swords, it is only slightly anthropomorphic. They are, at the end of the day, hey, what up?
Cyril tipped $5.
Cyril tipped $5. Thank you, Cyril. I don't know if you meant to put a question in there, Cyril, but if you did, put it in chat and I will definitely get to it. But thank you for the support, Cyril. I appreciate that and appreciate your support of the channel. Thank you. But these are anthropomorphic mice, but only slightly, in the sense that this isn't like Root, where the characters are like truly sort of like fox people and, raccoon people. These are the implication here is that they're mice. And sure, they can speak. They have tools, civilization. They wear a little bit of clothes. But like at the end of the day, they are still mice. And it is still in their nature to hide and to forage and to, be much more, subdued. Additionally, in Mouse Guard, with the exception of a handful, mostly the weasels, there's no humans. Okay, so that's number one. And number two, like the other animals, the owls, the snakes, the deer, the bear, the wolves, the coyotes, they aren't anthropomorphic. Okay, they are still wild animals who very much treat the mice just as if they were ordinary, regular mice, which is to say they prey upon them and they're predators. So there's this it's a very strange world, despite the fact that these are talking mice. There is no magic to speak of. It is exceptionally low fantasy. It is a sort of a very rudimentary game, a very rudimentary world, with, not really in some cases, a little bit of advanced tech, but not really. It's mostly pretty primitive. And again, it is a fantasy world. It is sort of a fable world. So some of the details aren't really examined too closely. But I also should point out that Mouse Guard is also not necessarily a children's tale. This is very much a world of loss where, mice, it's hard for them to survive. They can get killed very easily. They're frail creatures. So the game does not, nor the comic, shy away from death. And here we have it. And if I had to put a sort of a general, obviously the quote, which is inscribed into the wall of Lockhaven, is, it matters not what you fight, but what you fight for. And that's sort of the overarching theme of this game. If you want another quote from literary fiction, it's like when Galadriel tells Frodo when they are in Lothlorien, even the smallest person, right, can make a difference. And so this is fundamentally a game about fighting for what you believe in and challenging those beliefs and figuring out where your character or where your mouse is willing to make compromises and where they're not willing to make compromises, and how far would they go. And when given impossible odds, what choices do they make? So there's, I don't want to say it's fatalistic, because it's not fatalistic, but it's a game about tough choices, and it's about seeing what your character is made of. So that's the first elephant in the room. The second elephant in the room, which I will address, is that a lot of people say, Derek, wouldn't you hate something like this? And the answer is absolutely not. And they're like, I thought you hate stuff that's cute and furry and stuff. I do, when it is used in what I feel is a fashion that is very performative. When it is used in a way where it's just skin deep, AKA, hey, we're going to throw mice people into this otherwise ordinary game, and we're not going to really talk about it or think about it. We're going to give them some, racial feats, and that'll be the end of it. And the people who are playing them are going to play them just like they played a half elf or a half orc or a dwarf. It's all the same. This is a game fundamentally where being a mouse means something, and dealing with the nature of being a mouse versus being a mouse guard is actually one of the core elements of the game. We'll get into this as we go into the deep dive. But like I said, at the end of the day, your character, it's almost like the mice in this world are building this civilization in defiance of their sort of nature, right? The nature of the mice is to hide and to be meek and to run away and not to, make a stand. And so the game calls upon you, asks you to see where you fall on that spectrum. And of course, a character could get so far away from their mouse nature that they lose touch, they lose point, they lose touch with who they were, what they are. John with a $2 super chat says, waiting for the biker mice from Mars. Wow, I forgot about that cartoon. Holy crap, I hated that cartoon. Was that maybe there was a Nintendo game for that as well too? Maybe it was a Super Nintendo game actually. Thank you, John, for that. The book, this is the second edition of the book, and let's start as we often do by talking about, let's see if we can get here. So, I will say the game, the book is pretty long. A fair amount of it is dedicated to describing the cities and locations in the world of Mouse Guard, but it is laid out kind of poorly. Sometimes rules in one section aren't really fully described until much later in the book. But let's start with how the game works. Fundamentally, it is a dice pool system. You are going to roll a number of D6s. Usually this is going to be determined by the number of ranks that you have in a stat. And, one of the stats that you have it's called a skill. And a skill will have a different rating. So, your fighter skill, your healer skill, your hunter skill. And that can have a rating of 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And that's how many dice you would roll if you are testing that skill. Excuse me. When you roll those dice, any 1, 2s, or 3s are not successes. They call them snakes because they're trying to be cute. And any 4, 5s, and 6s are successes. 6s have a special power that you can activate later on with one of your narrative meta currencies. But for the most part, you have a 50-50 chance with every dice of getting a success. And when you attempt a skill check, the GM will set what is called the objective number, or the OB. It is abbreviated for it. Instead of calling it a DC or a TN, they call it OB. And that is the objective. That's what you're trying to get. You're trying to get OB 2 means you need 2 successes. So if I was, if the GM describes that you come across the mouse that you were trying to save, but he's been attacked and left for dead, almost killed by an owl. And you're like, I rush over to him and I'm going to try to save him. And I say, okay, that's going to be a healer check, but the OB is, 3 or the OB is 4. This guy's pretty messed up. And so then you would take your healer dice, you would roll them, and you would either succeed or fail. So that's honestly, that's like the whole game. I mean, we'll get into some of the ways that you can modify this and change some of these things. Obviously, there's exceptions, but by and large, that is really the entirety of the game. And while we're here, just because we're RPG people, and I always like to focus on mechanics that I consider to be somewhat unique and interesting, that kind of stand out, especially from our traditional RPGs. Is this character sheet? Are these skills? Okay. And they have some of the most common ones written down, but you can see that there are spaces for other ones. Although there is a list. It's not just make up any skills you want in the game. The game has a list of about 20 or 30 skills. The ones that are listed are sort of the most commonly used, and characters will often start with these skills, but there is room to adding, others. So you'll notice that next to each skill, there is a space for your character's rating. And let me see if I can bring this up here. Okay. Let me do something real quick. I have a form fillable PDF. There we go. Boom. There we go. All right. So here's the same character sheet, except it's the form fillable version. So here's our character sheet, and we've got our skill of fighter, and our rating is, let's say it's a 4. Okay. Well, one of the things that in this game is this game doesn't have experience points. Obviously, as I said before, skills are sort of your meat and potatoes. It's what you're primarily going to be rolling throughout the course of the game. So if the game doesn't have experience points, how do we know when we get better at fighting? And the answer is through the advancement column. And you'll notice that next to every skill is a separate track. And there are 2 of them. There's a P and an F. The P stands for pass, as in you pass the check. And F stands for failure, as in you failed the check. Just to make this a little bit easier, let's say we're not as good of a fighter as we thought we were. We're a fighter of 2. Okay. When I make a fighter check, my character will either pass the roll or they will fail the roll. And once I pass the roll, I mark a P. And once I fail a roll, I mark a failure. Once your character has as many passes as they have the rank in your skill, okay, and once you have as many failures as 1 minus your rank in the skill, your skill levels up. So in other words, once we get 2 passes and 1 failure, our fighter skill becomes a 3, and we reset these back to 0. Now, in order for our fighter skill to go to 4, we have to accumulate 3 passes and 2 failures. Now, this is a deep dive, so I apologize if we don't get into every element of the game because of these tangents, but I do think it's important for us to sort of dig into this a little bit, because this is one of those things where either you find this very interesting or you find this very not interesting. Fundamentally, Mouse Guard, in terms of GNS, is kind of strange because, in my opinion, it is a very narrativist game. It is a game that is really trying to, it's not trying to test your players. It's not trying to, whether it's with a tactical combat challenge, right? Grids and kind of solving the puzzle of combat. It's also not really trying to test the players in that sort of old school, Renaissance way where you're like, you can do anything. And then you have to be creative. And, they created a pulley system using a rope and a piton and a bag of caltrops and an flask of alchemist fire. And then they lured the creature in and it was a bloodbath. In general, Luke Crane games are pretty straightforward. The GM says make a fighter check, you're going to make a fighter check. There's a section, which I'll show you, says don't be a weasel, which is the idea of like, once the GM says you're making a fighter check, you're just making a fighter check. Or once the GM says you're making a hunter check, you're making a hunter check. There's no like trying to like, weasel your way out of it and be like, but what if I did this? And what if I did this? And what if I did this? This is a role-playing game that isn't as concerned about you, the player, sort of beating the game, right? Whether that's in the OSR sense or in the sort of new school 4th edition, 5th edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition sense, right? Where you're trying to use the mechanics to beat the game. good character builds or whatever like that. So this is a game that is more interested in using dice rolls just to prompt us as collaborative storytellers to create new and exciting and interesting stories. All right. So this, to me, this game is more of a role-playing game engine, right, than it is a role-playing game system. I know that's like a very weird distinction, but the game is definitely designed, I think, in a very mechanical way to push you into making interesting choices that will lead you to interesting stories. So what am I saying? So let me give you an example of that, okay? Let's say that this is what we looked like right now, okay? So you got to kind of divorce yourself from the idea of, maybe it's another way. Again, we've talked about this a lot on this channel. I apologize, by the way, if this is really, really deep stuff. This is the kind of stuff we get into on our Discord all the time. And sometimes, I just assume a certain, this is RPGs. This is not 100 level, right? This is 200, 300 level course. So sometimes some of this does assume certain things. But if you do have a question or you're not sure about something, please make sure to ask in chat. All right. We talk about the stances of player at a game table. And one of the stances that we talk about is like, in other words, how do you approach playing the game? And this was originally laid out by Ron Edwards, but we talk about the actor stance, we talk about the author stance, and we talk about the director stance. And the actor stance is that classic, thespian role player, right? The person who wants to embody their character and they want to live inside their character and they want to make all the decisions through the lens and through the mind of their character. This game almost explicitly tells you not to do that. And in fact, there's a whole section about table chatter and about playing the game to create the story and to be a bit detached. So let me, London says, all right, I'm out. So let me give you an example of this. We're playing the game. Now, the game still has mechanics, and again, mouse guard, what gets measured, right, gets managed. What gets rewarded gets repeated. Clearly, in the context of we want to be a good mouse guard, right? The mouse guard, by the way, are like mice knight errants, right? They roam the territories. They're sort of like mice samurai or mice, hedge knights. They roam the territories for the good of all, trying to, set right what has been put wrong. If you're familiar with Dogs in the Vineyard, there's almost an element of them being like dogs, which is another funny name. Although Dogs in the Vineyard played with animals would be pretty funny, but no, Dogs in the Vineyard was about religious extremism in the state of Utah. But anyways, our character, in order to advance their fighter skill, needs to fail. So the game is encouraging you at this point. It wants you to. In fact, this is part of the reason why the game is designed this way. To advance your fighter skill, to advance any skill, you obviously have to show that you are proficient and can do what the skill requires, which is why it requires a certain number of passes. But the game also requires that in order for you to get better at something, you sometimes have to push yourself beyond the limit for which you can handle, right? We can only learn by being put into adverse situations. In this case, the game fully expects that you, as the player, are going to try to engineer a situation where your character will be called upon to make a fighter skill check, right? Presumably because something important is at stake, but you as the player are looking to fail that check, right? So, and this is, again, is a weird situation, but it's designed to create these sort of storytelling moments. Sort of a spoiler alert. When you're making a check, other players can help you if they are in a position to do so, and they have a skill or a wise that lets them aid you. So, you might be like fighting, and I'm describing how a a group of weasel knights have just broken in through the barrier and they're, making their way into the town square. And, you say, I charge off to beat them back to buy people more time. And I said, okay, that's going to be a fighter check, ob 3. And the other players are like, oh, let me help you. Let me help you. Let me help you. And of course, from the point of view of your mouse, you of course want to succeed at this because you want to stop the weasels from invading the thing. And of course, by the way, that might be a decision that you as a player / you as your character make. But also the game is trying to create an incentive for you to say, no, you know what? I don't want your help. And let's explain why that is in the fiction, right? And I say, there's not time for that. Go get the villagers out of here. And then my character rushes into the gap alone. Now, what am I doing here? Well, I may be trying to fail on purpose so that I can advance. Now, that is a very weird thought process to be a part of. But the idea is that these failures and that being motivated by the game are going to push us into these situations where we're going to make dramatic actions. Okay. Rule of Cool says, what if I have fighter 1? Do I need to fail 1 check or just have a success? Now, Rule of Cool, I don't want to jinx myself here by saying the wrong thing. So hold on a sec here. Got to find this PDF. Acrobat. Here we go. So my understanding, if I'm correct, is that when you level up a character or when you acquire a skill for the first time, I believe it is at rank 2. So I don't think you can actually have rank 1. Let's see here. I got to go to learning a new skill. Now, this is something that, unfortunately, this is not a major publisher of books. So there's there's not this super hyperlinked character or PDF. You do have to look it up just like a normal person. All right. So yes, you can attempt, by the way, any school. You can attempt any skill. You don't necessarily have to have that skill. And you do something called beginner's luck. Okay. The first time you use a skill that you do not have, you don't put a number there. You put an X and you check off one of the pass bubbles. It doesn't matter whether you passed or failed. Okay. You need to keep a record of how many times you tried to use the skill. Okay. So fill in an additional bubble each time you try to use it. All right. Now, this is where I talked about the part of nature and being part of the game. Once you have attempted to use that skill a number of times equal to your nature rating, you open the skill at a rating of 2. Erase the X rating and all of the check marks that you did towards learning it, and then write a 2 as the normal rating. You can now test this ability as normal. So there's a lot that we just covered there. But the long story is, if the first time I went to try to use the healer skill, okay, I would mark an X, although this PDF does not let me mark an X, so I'll mark a 0. Then each time I try to use healer, whether I pass or fail, I'm just going to mark these bubbles. I could technically mark these ones, I guess, if I wanted to, but whatever. My character has a stat. It is called mouse nature. Okay? Sail Away with a $10 super chat. Thank you very much, Sail Away. Says Luke Crane is need for a deep dive. Exactly. I'm just talking about the skill resolution system and how you acquire skills and how that affects the gameplay of the game. But yes, Luke Crane. Here's the thing about Luke Crane. We've talked in this channel before about complex versus complication. These are, relatively simple mechanics. Roll a bunch of D6. 4, 5s, and 6s equals a success. You need a number of successes equal to basically to the DC. Super simple, right? But the complexity goes deeper beyond that, right? And the game gets more and more and more deep. And the implication of the rules becomes a more and more evolved and nuanced set of circumstances. So I said before that your character is a mouse, fundamentally, first and foremost. And this is represented numerically through something called your nature, okay? And the higher the value of your mouse nature, okay, the more mouse-like you are. And we can look up in the book, but I can tell you that like the mouse nature is to hide, to run, to forage, to be meek, right? To scurry, to hide. Okay. And so in the context of the game, if your mouse nature is really, really high, you are really, really in touch with your sort of almost like your genetic predisposition to be a mouse. As a result of this, it does have certain advantages for you. But let's say our mouse 5 is really high, by the way. Let's say our mouse nature is 5, which is really high. Okay, which is pretty high. That means, however, all this stuff down here, fighting, healing, hunting, instructing, right, manipulating, orating, this isn't mouse shit, right? This is, for lack of a better word, people shit, adventurer shit, right? Mouse guard shit. And so when our mouse nature is very high, it takes us longer to learn a new skill because we're not in the headspace of a person. Our mouse is more like a mouse, okay? When your mouse nature is high, as it is right now, with a 5, that means that if I wanted to learn a new skill, like Hunter, I would need to attempt 5 Hunter checks. And only after I attempt 5 Hunter checks would we delete all these, and then our Hunter is now a 2. And now we have the skill, right? We finally have acquired that new skill. And now we would advance it in the ways that we were discussing before, where I have to pass and I have to fail, okay? But throughout the course of the game, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to basically to work against our mouse nature, okay? To call upon our inner strength, but not to hide and not to scurry and not to, flee, but to fight and to stand. Now, this can be very empowering and very powerful, but it can also damage our mouse nature. Our characters can become less mouse-like and more adventurer-like, more people-like, for lack of a better word. Now, unfortunately, when you lose touch with who you are, it means that you are leaving something behind. But what it does mean is that our character is now able to learn new skills much faster than they were when their nature was a 5, or maybe this is a different mouse. This is a different character. So now that our nature is only a 2, if I go and I heal somebody and I mark doesn't matter whether I pass or fail, I just have to try to make a healer check. And then I make a second healer check. Once I make the second healer check, delete them. And now I have that skill at 2. So when your mouse nature gets really low, your character is almost not even a mouse anymore. They're almost like a person. And not only is that reflected in sort of a way that you should maybe role play the character, but it also is reflected in the ease with which you are able to learn new skills that are, for lack of a better word, outside of the purview of a traditional mice mentality. And so we can acquire these new skills. And we can't buy them. We don't level up with them, okay? You can try any skill in the game. And after you use it a number of times, depending on your mouse nature, you will gain that skill. And then you have to pass and fail at it in order to keep increasing your rating. All right. So this already creates a bunch of weird tensions, okay, that work for and against themselves. Because again, you're going to be looking, and the game, there's some passages in this book. I don't know if we'll be able to get to every single one of them, but they will stand out to you compared to other role-playing games that you may have read, for how direct and how to the point, and in some cases how I don't want to say mean. Mean is not the word. They're very, very blunt with what they say. And let me see if I can just find one really quickly here. Hold on a sec here. All right, here we go. Let me pull this one up here. Okay. So this is we'll get into how you earn checks, but it says checks are very valuable and useful. It's your job to be proactive about earning them. It's not the GM's job to coddle you and provide equal screen time for all players. You must be proactive. A hero risks himself to overcome his own weaknesses and improve the common good with his sacrifice. So this is a paragraph that you might not normally expect to see in a role-playing game, okay? Talking about the GM's job. It's not there to coddle you. It's not there to provide equal screen time. You know, the core of the game is fighting for what you believe in. And this game kind of puts that front and center. It's not a PvP game by any stretch of the imagination, but it is definitely a game where sometimes the players are going to disagree, and you have to fight for what you want as a player and as a PC. So not for quiet folks. I mean, I don't want to say that you're wrong, but I would say that if you're the type of player who just wants to sit back and doesn't want to be proactive and doesn't want to, get involved, I do think that this game could really be a problem. It's not to say that you literally have to be a loudmouth and push people down. It's more of just to the point that, like, if you want to earn checks, which you do want to earn checks, you kind of have to speak up. You kind of have to be like, hey, I'm doing this and this is why. And that's I'm trying to advocate. I'm advocating for myself. I'm advocating for my character, and so on and so forth. Are there advantages to having a high mouse nature? Oh, Callimachus, there definitely are. For lack of a better word. So we touched on this a little bit on Torchbearer, but to give an example, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pulling these numbers out of my head. If your mouse nature goes to 0, okay, and you don't raise it by the end of the session, your character is forced to retire. They have basically completely lost touch with what it means to be a mouse. And they are now so detached from society that they can no longer function as a mouse guard. Similarly, if your mouse nature goes to 7, I think, or 6, 7, and ends the session at 7, your character also is forced to retire. Your character puts down the sword and the shield and the spear, okay? Because they have become so mouse-like that it is not in them to be this bold mouse knight, right? Journeying through dangerous paths and fighting off terrifying predators. They aren't necessarily going to go hide in a rock under the ground, but they basically have put away their adventuring side. So that's what it means to have a high nature. That's what it means to have a low nature. However, when your nature is high, aka you're sort of very much in touch with your sort of inner mouse, that could be a great source of strength. And you can tap into that nature in order to give you immense bonuses. And in game terms, let's talk in game terms, Callimachus. In game terms, your nature can be a resource where you can literally add the number of your nature to your skill number to create a big, huge dice pool. All right. So, for example, if our fighter was 3 and our nature was a 5 and we tapped our nature, we would add 5 to 3 and we would roll 8 dice for our fighter skill. It's a tremendous bonus, but it does run the risk because we're using our nature, but not for mouse stuff. We're using it for hero, knight, adventure, fighting shit. So we run the risk that our nature will be damaged when we may have started that at 5, but when all is said and done, now our nature is 4 or 3. And the reason is because we were using sort of our inner strength but not for what we were born for, but for something that is more or beyond or different from what our essential nature is. And so, yes, there are definitely advantages to having a high nature. So anyways, so there's language in here that, you know, is sometimes a bit off-putting to some people, but you know, it's fine. So let's see what else we got here. All right. Rule of Cool asks, which was first, the Torchbearer RPG or Burning Wheel? Oh, well, Burning Wheel was definitely first. Burning Wheel came out early 2000s. Like Burning Wheel came out before Apocalypse World. Burning Wheel came out before, you know, Blades in the Dark, obviously, because that came after Apocalypse World. So Burning Wheel came out much earlier. Mouse Guard came out around the time 4th edition came out. So Mouse Guard came out like 2008, 2009, the first edition. So Mouse Guard is kind of a contemporary of the, you know, Apocalypse World, Monster Hearts, that type of thing. And it was definitely a stripped down version. Torchbearer didn't come out until, you know, the 2010s. So Mouse Guard came first. So it went Burning Wheel, then Mouse Guard, then Torchbearer is sort of the progression. Now, this, which we're specifically going through today, is the second edition of Mouse Guard. It has the red cover. That came out after Torchbearer had come out. So they kind of maybe, you know, updated and learned some things from the Torchbearer times. All right. Where were we? Okay. We were talking about advancements. Okay. So that, you know, that's sort of, you know, sort of the gist of what, you know, the game is. We're essentially creating pools of D6s, we're rolling them, and then we're seeing if we pass or fail. All right. So what else is there, and how does this game sort of stand out? How does this game sort of work? Well, this game has this really unique structure. Let's see if we have a good. Let's see if we have. All right. This game has a structure where it talks about the idea of the GM's turn and then the player's turn. And this may seem very, very strange, but the way that this game is set up is the idea is that the players will have things that they want to do, okay, including recovery, which is not something that you get to do for free in this game. All right. So in a GM, the GM's turn is kind of a weird phrase. Think of it as when you're going on the adventure. All right. So the mission, you're a mouse guard, right? You're a member of an organization. You're given a mission, right? You need to deliver a message to the town of Barkstone. However, the roads and passes were destroyed last fall in a terrible landslide, and no one has found a new trail yet. So you're going to have to like trailblaze and pathfind your way across the essentially, you know, the wilderness of the woods to get to Barkstone to deliver this message. So that's the mission that has been given to you. That's the adventure. This is called the GM's turn. The GM will use this turn to throw challenges at the players. So this isn't really an opportunity for the characters to get ahead, right? This is the GM saying, "Hey, these are the challenges that you have to face." And again, the game in a certain way is very procedural. It wants things to be done in a certain way. And specifically, when you have a mission, you are going to discover, or you're going to encounter two obstacles in the GM's turn. Okay. So there are 4 types of obstacles. There are weather obstacles. There are wilderness obstacles. There are animals, and there are mice. Okay. So the 4 types of challenges that you can overcome or that you might face when you are basically doing your mission or going, to do whatever it is you're supposed to do are either going to be weather, wilderness, animals, or mice. And you're going to encounter 2 of them, and they can't be the same one. All right. So in this case, and the game, it can move along at a pretty brisk pace, right? And so the GM is going to describe the obstacle to you, and we're going to get right into it. We're going to start trying to tackle that obstacle. All right. And that's going to involve eventually, there might be some, players making suggestions and going back and forth with the GM. But finally, the GM is going to call for a check. They're going to say, okay, I hear your approach. I see what you're doing. You guys are going to try to make your way through the tangled woods and thorns and rocky slides to reach Barkstone. All right, well, that is going to be a Pathfinder test. And the objective is going to be 3 or 4. There's a table that helps you decide, but basically, 2 or 3 is pretty standard. So then someone's going to basically assemble a dice pool, and they're going to roll the dice, and we're going to see what happens. There isn't a lot of, super hyper tactical, puzzle solving like, I'm going to trigger this feat, which will unlock this ability, and then we'll super Muso power into it. It's not really about that. The dice rolls aren't super interesting. They are just designed to get us into the next part of the story. And it'll either be a success or it'll be a failure. All right. So you are going to have to you're going to have to deal with 2 obstacles in order to, complete or beat the mission. Okay. And by the way, they say here that don't be afraid to give the players some options to overcome the obstacles. It's not entirely on them. You can tell them, this might be a good place to use this skill, or maybe you could try to use this skill. But obviously you want to listen to your players and you want to, have a back and forth. But at the end of the day, once you decide what you're doing, you have to do it. All right. Now, during the GM's turn, okay, he's going to be trying to, or she's going to be trying to sort of beat up, if you will, your mice. Okay. And we can see here that we have 5 conditions that can be marked on our character. And conditions don't just go away. Okay. We actually have to specifically take actions in the game to solve or to resolve these conditions. And anytime we fail a check, the GM, and again, this is where this game can get pretty wonky. The GM can assign a condition as appropriate in the fiction. All right. However, there is sort of a caveat. There's sort of a weird caveat to that. So obviously, if a character succeeds, right, whenever the player passes one of the ability or skill tests put in front of them, they get what they want and they overcome the obstacle. And, you and the player should both offer a little bit of cool description and celebrate the moment. Okay. So if our character was pathfinding and the objective was 3 and they roll their pile of D6 and they get 4 successes, great. You have succeeded. Right. And, this game doesn't make you have to roll 18 times for one thing. It's like, nope, you succeeded. You find your way through the tangled brine. You find a new trail. You find a new path that will let you get to Barkstone where you're going. And after that's done, we move on to the next obstacle. All right. And again, there's going to be 2 obstacles and then you have succeeded. However, what happens if you fail? What happens if you don't get enough successes? Well, one of 2 things can happen. You can decide that the person fails to overcome the obstacle and throw an unexpected twist into the story. So this is where it is never a situation where the player fails and nothing happens. Okay? But this is where this game is interesting because on the surface, this game is binary, right? The way like D20 is. Either the PC passes or the PC fails, right? And we're thinking about more narrative games. We think about Blades in the Dark. We think about Powered by the Apocalypse. We think about games that you succeed with a complication, right? Or you fail. This game has that, but it puts some of that ability back onto the GM. In this game, when a player fails, the GM gets to choose. Does the player fail and an unexpected twist gets thrown into the story? Or, even though the player failed, you can allow the player to pass, but they gain a condition. So, as the GM, again, this is why I said this game is not about like trying to simulate some sort of reality. As a GM, you get to decide at this point in the story what makes sense. If you're like, it would be really weird or confusing, I don't really want them. I want them to get to Barkstone. Now, they have to make a check, and this matters because there are game world consequences for this. But I don't want to like really have them fail. So somebody makes a Pathfinder check, okay, to navigate their way to Barkstone. And they fail. They don't roll enough successes on their D6. Well, you could say, as a GM, you get to make that decision. They could either fail and there's a new twist or an unexpected obstacle pops up, or you could say they succeed but with a condition. So already you can imagine that I might say, well, you get there, but it takes you a lot longer than you ever thought possible. Your days are filled with endless back and forth, dead ends, routes that go nowhere, circuitous paths. In fact, you're pretty sure that you camp by the same oak tree at least 3 nights in a row. By the time you arrive in Barkstone, you are tired, and everybody would mark the tired condition. I should note, just as an aside, that if you decide to help somebody with a check, if they fail the check, and as a result of failing that check, acquire conditions, everyone who helped them also acquires that condition. So if you were describing how your character was running around, constantly keeping an eye out, trying to point out obvious problem areas for the person who was doing the pathfinding, and you say, so I'm helping with my scout, you give them a D6 to add to their pool, right? So maybe their pathfinder was, a 4, so they're rolling 4 dice, but you help them, right? Colin helps out and gives me a D6. Great, thanks, Colin. Now I'm rolling 5 dice instead of 4, and maybe Michael or Philip gives me a dice as well. So Philip and Colin both gave me a D6 by helping. So now I have 6 dice in my pool: 4 from my pathfinder, 1 from one from Colin, 1 from Philip, and then I fail, and the GM rules that I'm tired. Well, guess what? Philip and Colin are also tired. So helping isn't necessary. Basically, helping isn't free. That's the key. There's a cost if the person who's doing this can fail. And so your character becomes tired, and tired, any of these conditions is not something that is going to be very easily dealt with. There is no long-term rest in this game. Okay. We haven't gotten to it yet, but after the GM's turn comes the player's turn. And on the player's turn, you get to make actions. You get to basically be proactive. Now, there might be a lot of things that you want to do on the player's turn. One of the things you might want to do is recover from a condition, and you have to make a check. And if you fail that check, you don't recover from that condition. It is entirely possible that your character may have conditions for a very long time. So gaining a condition is actually a fairly notable thing. Now, one thing you'll notice is it says there is no dead condition. And that is because your mouse cannot die, okay, from conditions. The only way that your mouse can die is if you are in a conflict where death is on the line. And we'll talk about conflicts later, but you can basically never just die. Now, in Torchbearer you can, by the way, but but that's because in Torchbearer there is a condition after injured and sick, okay, which is afraid. But then there's one after that, which is dead. Dead is a condition in Torchbearer, which means that if there's nothing else to mark, you have to mark dead. So Mouse Guard doesn't have that. So, but going back to the core of the game, as the GM, when a player fails, it's basically you get to decide what happens. You could say, well, you failed the dice, because here's again the thing we have to realize: the dice aren't really a simulation of like what's actually happening, because you failed the roll. So shouldn't that mean you failed and you don't get to the town? No, it just means that in the fiction, you didn't get to the town with no problems and with no issues or no problems. I could say you get to the town, but you're tired. Or I could say that you failed to get into the town, and then I can introduce a twist. And a twist is often a new obstacle, okay? And it even says, sometimes it could just be a cool moment that you describe. But the most important part here is the story, right, lingers on. And so, you can see here there's an example. In this case, the mice have been given a mission to find a missing grain peddler, a mouse who's transporting a load of grain. So Kenzie, one of the mice, instructs Liam, one of the mice, to climb to a higher vantage point to see if he can spot the missing grain peddler. Liam tests his scout skill and fails. The GM rubs his hands together and chuckles a bit. "You failed?" he asks. "You don't see any mice, but you do see an overturned grain cart." As soon as that test is failed, the GM twists the story in a new direction. He decides that the patrol is too late. The grain peddler has been eaten by a snake. And so basically the GM has twisted the story. And so whereas before they had to locate this grain peddler and talk to him because he might be a spy, now they have to contend with a snake. And you'll note that there are 4 types of obstacles, right? There's weather, wilderness, animals, and mice. And you can never use the same obstacle twice. So in this case, the obstacle was a mouse obstacle, right? You were trying to deal with this mouse. Well, it failed, so you twist and you introduce a new obstacle. In this case, an animal obstacle, which is a snake, all right? However, in another situation, maybe the game plays out differently. Maybe when the snake comes after them, they go, "We're going to try to escape." And you go, "Okay." Well, luckily, mice, it's part of their nature is to run away. And so you can actually roll your nature whenever you're trying to flee or hide or do mouse stuff. And they fail. But the GM's like, "Well, I don't want them to I don't even know what I would do. And I don't really want the story to end here. And I can't even think of anything." So instead I say, "Okay, even though you failed the roll to escape, you escape. But you're tired and you're angry from all the exertion and from failing in your mission. You weren't able to get to the grain peddler in time, and a snake eat him. And then it almost ate you." And so regardless of what happens, right, the story is moving forward. We've escaped. We've gone forward. But our characters are always going to be sort of changing. And in many cases, they're going to be getting the shit kicked out of them, right? You're going to be acquiring all of these different conditions, which, eventually can stack up and really cause you a lot of problems. All right. So assuming eventually that we make it through the GM's turn, okay, we then enter, and by the way, the game suggests that a game session of Mouse Guard might take between 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4, depending on how much in character fluffy bullshit stuff you do. It says the GM's turn should take up the first half of that, right? The GM is throwing stuff at you that you have to deal with. The second half, and then the GM's turn's finished. The GM says, "Okay, well, you make it to the town. The grain peddler got eaten. The snake chased you away, and you arrive battered, bruised, angry, tired, and without the shipment of grain. Okay, my turn is over. The mission part of the game is over. Maybe we could take a quick break. Everybody could go grab a slice of pizza, hit the bathroom or whatever, check your phones. And then when we get back in 10 or 15 minutes, we're going to do the player's turn. Now, remember, this came out in 2008, but it is very obvious that, things like Blades in the Dark and its system of scores, his score is very much like the GM's turn. And then downtime in Blades in the Dark is very much like the player's turn in Mouse Guard, right? So once the players kind of overcome the mission and beat the challenges, the GM's turn ends, okay? And the player's turn begins, okay? So it's the GM's job to beat the crap out of your guard mice. It's your job to survive the beating and overcome. During the player's turn, you may try to recover a bit, build up your resources, in addition to taking care of other miscellaneous businesses. All right? So as an example here, after traveling such a long distance and fighting with a snake, our guard mice, Kenzie, Liam, and Saxon, are tired and angry. They are also far from Barkstone, which was where they originally were headed, and the conspiracy to overthrow Lockhaven. Okay? So basically, the game mode shifts now to where the GM says, okay, I've thrown what I needed to throw at you. We're now in this new situation, which none of us could have predicted. Now, what do you all want to do? And you get to make tests. You get to basically say, I want to do this thing, right? In the GM's turn, the GM is throwing obstacles at you and, she's listening to you. But at the end of the day, the GM kind of gets to make a decision. What skill are you going to roll? What is going to happen with this twist? In the player's turn, it's the players who get to push the action. And the players can take these proactive actions in order to maybe complete their mission or to gain more resources or to recover from the conditions that have been inflicted upon them. But there's the rub. The number of checks or tests that you as a player are allowed to make in the player's turn is limited. Yes, limited. It is, you don't get to just say, well, I'm going to meditate to get rid of my angry. I'm going to relax to get rid of my tired. I'm maybe going to get a good night's sleep. And then I'm going to try to talk. I'm going to do some research and then we're going to get to town. And then once we get to town, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to find out more about this grain peddler. Was he a spy? Okay. Nope. That's 4 things. You don't get to do 4 things in the player's turn. You get to do 1 thing, 1 check, 1 test, 1 opportunity, right? You get 1 check to try to recover from your conditions, to go find an old friend in town, to fashion new armor, to pick a fight, maybe with an NPC, maybe with a PC, or to buy a gift for your love. The player's turn is when you get to do the cool shit that you want to do. Sometimes maybe related to your character, in-character stuff, but also related to the mechanics of the game. So if I want to recover from being tired and angry, I'm in a rough boat, okay? Because I only get 1 check. I only get 1 test. Each player gets 1 test. Now that may seem like it is not enough. And you are right. It is not enough. So you'll note that the way that the rules were written is it says you get 1 free test. Okay? You get 1 free test. What you can earn I should say what you have the ability to do, you get 1 for free, but you can earn additional checks to be used during the player's turn. All right? So how do we do that? Well, down here at the bottom of our character sheet, we can see that we've got, up at the top, we've got our characters' nature. We've got, their resources is like how much money they have. We've got our skills. Okay. And down here at the bottom, we have traits. Okay. And let me go ahead and quickly find in the PDF where the traits are. Traits are on page 255. Okay. All right. Okay, so let me bring up this. Okay, so here are the traits. It's a defined list in the game. These are traits that your character can have. You can be alert. You can have the big paw, bold, brave, calm, bodyguard, clever, compassionate, cunning, defender. Okay, you can have a number of traits. Is there any limits? You start with a certain number of traits, and I think there's a certain limit to how many traits that you can actually have. Okay, but you have these traits, and the key thing about these traits is they, generally speaking, sound fairly positive. Like your character is determined, your character is driven, but your character is an early riser, fearless, fiery. There's some in there that are maybe a little bit more circumspect, like fearful. Okay, so traits are a good thing. And the reason why traits are a good thing is going back to our character sheet. A trait, so let's say our character had the fiery trait, okay? And maybe this thing will even let us type. It will not. This is a pretty good, there we go. Okay, so we have email, thank you. We have the fiery trait, okay? And what's maybe another good trait? Let's see. We have the generous doesn't really seem like it would make that much sense. Fiery and hard worker. All right, let's just say that those are our character's traits. Okay. Hard worker. Okay, so we've got two traits. Now you can see here that the traits can have a level 1, 2, or 3. Okay. And at the bottom here, we can see what these do for us. If we have a level 1 trait, we can add 1 die once per session to a check that we make. We can basically describe how that trait applies to the check that we're making. And assuming we're not being a weasel about it and everybody agrees, including the GM, then we get to add an extra die to that die roll. If we have a level 2 trait, we can use this twice per session. And if we have a level 3 in our trait, +1 S means +1 success. Like, so it's an automatic success anytime we roll. So it's better than a die because it's basically a die that is already set to success. So having a trait, very powerful. And of course, that's a fun role-playing moment, right? Where we describe why and how this thing applies. And obviously, we can only use our traits so many times per session, which is indicated by this used for. But then we also see this thing over here, which is used against. And this is where Mouse Guard, again, it is a game about building narratives, okay? It is not a narrative with a game. These are mechanics that are designed to create and promote interesting story moments. As I said before, you want to have checks in the player's turn because you need them in order to do all the stuff that you want to do. Because unlike in a traditional RPG where it's just like, well, I can do everything I want. I mean, it's a 24-hour day. I have a whole week. I could do everything. In this game, you can't do that. You only get to do basically one thing for each check, and you only get one check. So the way that you get more checks is you use traits and checks against yourself, okay, in the GM's turn. All right. So how does that work? Well, if we take a penalty to a test that we're rolling because of a trait, then we earn a check. Okay, that's this first one here. So in other words, we might be describing how, where our characters, and again, this is where the, kind of the creative juices start flowing. But I'm describing how my character is trying to, talk to let's say the grain peddler wasn't eaten by a snake, and the grain peddler's right there, and I get into the character thing, and I'm trying to, tell him like, look, we know you're in trouble. We're here to help you. We're Mouse Guard. We don't care what you've done. Okay, let's just everybody get to Barkstone safely. Okay, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do from there. But you're like, but you know what? This is where the game gets kind of meta gamey, but in a good way. I could be like, you know what? The GM's like, okay, so you're trying to persuade this person. And I go, yep. And they go, all right, what's your persuader? And I say, I have nothing in persuader. And they go, okay, so you're using beginner's luck? And I go, yeah. And they're like, so how many dice are you going to be rolling? And I look it up and I go, 1. And it's or like 2, and it's like, okay, so you're really bad at this. And I go, yep, I am really bad at this. You know why I'm really bad at this? Because I'm getting fiery. I'm getting heated. And I'm like, you know what? You're lucky we don't just kill you right here. You're a traitor. And, and basically my character's doing a horrible job being persuasive because they're fiery and they're getting worked up. And I think this person betrayed the Mouse Guard, betrayed my hometown, and I'm getting hyped. I'm getting up in his face about it. Now, in game mechanic terms, my character's horrible at Persuader. I'm going to probably almost for certain fail anyways, right? So for me, this is kind of like, now granted, the group has to sort of be like okay with this, right? Because the group has to be like, to a certain extent, they have to be okay with the fact that we're about to fail. But they also understand that part of the meta of this game is us failing so that we can earn checks and so that we can earn skill improvements. Because I'll give you another example. Let's say that my character actually isn't that bad at persuading. Let's say that my character has a persuader of 3. And I have passed 3 persuader checks. And I have failed 1 of them. So all I need to do is fail 1 more persuader check. And once I do that, boop, my persuader will go up to a 4, rank 4, which is great. Rolling 1 more die, huge bonus. But the problem is I'm actually pretty okay at this. I'm rolling 3 dice. So the other players say, oh, we'll help you out. And I go, actually, why don't you guys not help me out with this? And actually, you know what, GM? I'm going to get a little bit hot under the collar here. And I'm going to start spouting off at this guy. And I'm going to start giving him a bit of piece of my mind about how he's a traitor and maybe getting a little bit in his face because I'm real fiery and I'm really worked out. And the GM goes, okay, well, you're going to have a -1 die to your check. And I go, yep, I know that because my persuader is 3. I want it to be lower. So that way, number 1, I fail, which will give me the failure I need to increase my persuader to 4. But also, I'm working my fiery trait against myself. And when I go into the next player's turn, okay, I'm going to count up all of the times I used a trait against myself during the GM's turn, and I get to add those to the number of player checks I get to make. I get 1 for free, but if this is what our character sheet looked like as we went into the player's turn, I would get a bonus 5 checks, which means I would get 6 checks that I could use. Okay. So there's a real strong incentive for me to fail. Similarly, or additionally, let's say my character is insanely good at Persuader. Okay. We're not even close. Maybe we're not even close to leveling up, but we're at 5. Well, you know what? My character might say, I think, the GM says, well, this is objective 2. Okay. And I go, okay, well, this is really easy for my character. I am going to be fiery and hyped up anyways. You know why? Because I'll earn a check. And you know what? Even with -1 dice, I'll probably still pass, And so now my skill is high enough that I could use my traits against myself and it probably won't hurt me, right? So this is where the game is it is not a game with role playing, okay? It is a role playing game. The literal mechanics of the game are, how do I role play to gain skill ups? How do I role play to gain checks so that I can do things? How do I role play in order to, you know what I mean? Like it is a role playing arrow game. It is not a game with role playing. And when I say game with role playing, I mean D&D. I mean Pathfinder 2. I mean most RPGs, honestly. But this is a game about, this is not even a game about role playing. It is a role playing game in the truest of senses, because the very nature of the game is this. Now, this is one of those things where in a deep dive, I feel reason to point out. It is one of the hard times that I have when I sit down and I play games with people is, and by the way, Luke Crane games in particular are very much the case of this. There is a lot of complexity that emerges because of the interplay of all these different mechanics. And it is a nuance that I think is easily lost the first time you play this game. And you might, I've seen it before where people play this game or I've run it for them. And, you know, I've run more Torchbearer probably at this point than Mouse Guard. And I see them go, yeah, it's fine. You know, it's like D&D, but you roll D6s. And it's like, they're, you know, I'm not going to spend 3 hours like we're doing right now. And I'm not going to explain every single nuance of all these mechanics the first time someone sits down to play the game. But there is there's a real skill to being good at this game. Being good at this game means that not only is your character using the mechanics well, but you're not using the mechanics to beat the game, right? That's what OSR is, right? Where you're not even using the mechanics, right? You're using the fiction, right? You know, oh, you described that the ceiling here was loose. Okay, so maybe we can like poke at it or something with a stick as the monster comes in. We collect, right? OSR is all about like that outside of the box, paradigm breaking thinking, rulings, not rules. But at the end of the day, you're trying to beat the game. You're trying to beat the dungeon. You're trying to beat the adventure. And in Pathfinder 2nd edition or D&D 4th edition or whatever, you know, you're using your feats and you're using your powers and abilities, and it's a tactical challenge. And again, you're trying to beat the game. You're trying to win. You're trying to overcome the obstacles. This is a game where you may not be. Now, ostensibly, your mouse doesn't want to fail. Your mouse wants to be a mouse guard, and your mouse wants to be the great champion and save everybody and do the right thing and do all this stuff. But as a player, that's why I said before, I don't think that this game is very good for that actor approach where you are your character and you are one and you are only taking actions that would be appropriate for your character. That is not what this game is about, because it relies on the fact that as the player of your PC, you sometimes kind of have it out against your PC, right? Sometimes you are trying to throw your own character under the bus, so to speak. And you're doing it because the game rewards you for doing that. And it is appropriate for you to do so. And following that play pattern will create feral, exciting, unpredictable, truly, truly emergent storytelling. That's the genius of Luke Crane. That's the genius of Burning Wheel Light systems, is that just by doing the game, the story emerges kind of almost from the ether. All right. And it feels appropriate because you're not just, you know, because if we were playing, let's just imagine, okay, that we were playing a D&D game, okay? And same situation. Maybe we're not anthropomorphic mice, although these days, who the hell knows? But let's say we're playing a D&D game or a Pathfinder 2 game, and there's a grain merchant, and we think that he's a spy, and we need to, convince him to come with us. So everybody looks to me, right? So what do you do as a group, as the play group? What do you do? What do you do? You look to the character with the highest charisma. You look to the character with the highest diplomacy check, right? Absolutely. It's 100%. And almost in every single situation, the group would say, we're going to have, the bard, the face character, go talk to the peddler and convince him to come with us, okay? Because we're not in a position to fight him, and we kind of need him to come with us. Everybody would do that, okay? You would never say, well, the barbarian goes over and talks to him, because you know that that's just going to generate a failure. And if for some odd reason, while like the party's still discussing it, Derek playing the barbarian goes, I walk over to him and I'm going to convince him, all right. And everyone else is like, no, dude, you're being an ass, because you're going to roll low, you're going to fail, and it's going to fuck us. And they're not wrong. But furthermore, I am being kind of an ass. Now, I might say, well, it's what my character would do. But you know what? I don't think that's ever been a good defense ever. Even when people truly mean it and they're not just being an asshole about it, the fact of the matter is, you know, and I know that when someone says that, you cannot help but internally roll your eyes and say, whatever, you piece of shit. It happens every single time, and I refuse to believe otherwise. But because when I go over with my barbarian to balls the diplomacy roll, I'm not helping anybody. I'm not helping my character. I'm not helping the group. I'm just being kind of a troll for the sake of the role playing. And and you're like, okay, but we are playing a game though. You know that, right? It just is bad feels. In this game, the group might understand, oh yeah, you need a check. Oh yeah, you need a failure. Oh yeah, you should totally go and fail that check, right? Because that is the game. You're not being a jerk about it. You're playing the game. You need to fail in order to improve. You need to use traits against yourself in order to have enough checks to actually do anything in the player's turn. You have to throw your character under the bus. You have to throw the party under the bus. And that's what makes the game so unpredictable, because the odds that your character is just going to, get out scot-free are zero. John coming in with the $3.
John B tipped $3. Have they done a setting agnostic rule engine for this? Doesn't seem like there's much tying it to mice. Sounds like a cool system you'd love to see more implementations of.
Well, John, I agree with you. It is not really tied to mice. In fact, the reason that you know that it's not tied to mice is Torchbearer, right? Which is basically D&D Adventurers, uses nearly the same system. And obviously that's, people, wizards, clerics, rogues, fighters, instead of mice. And they're going into dungeons and they're doing that stuff instead of this stuff. Now, some of the mechanics of Torchbearer are a little different, obviously, but fundamentally, now they have never actually created a burning wheel light generic system, to my knowledge, per se. But I agree, actually. The system itself is not really tied. And also, too, you can get a lot of John, if we're thinking about like in terms of like, setting what skills are available in your game, like we would in Fate, by changing what traits are available, by changing what are the conditions in my game, right? Imagine we were using the same exact system to do some sort of cyberpunk game, right? We might have a condition that says, hacked, or we might have a condition that says, your social score has been tanked, condition tanked, it's a reputation based economy. And you're currently you got a bunch of downvotes, right? You're very low karma. Anyways, point is like, you could really change up the tone of this game just by tweaking a couple of like the conditions, the traits, the skill lists themselves. And yeah, so, getting back to what I was talking about before with the traits, you can use them against yourself to earn these checks. And then when we get into the player's turn and it's my opportunity to do cool shit, okay? Then I can get some stuff done. All right. But here's the thing. Playing good in this game means playing badly. Because if you play super tight, I got sick build, I'm doing everything right. Oh, we passed all of the checks, nothing failed. We had the best skills. Everybody was stacked up, car op max to the back. And then you're going to get, okay, you all are awesome. You succeed. But when you get to town or when you complete the mission, each of you gets one check. None of you have any extra checks. None of you improved any of your skills. So in a weird way, by succeeding, you fail. Okay? By failing, you succeed. Right? And ultimately, the game works best when there's a mix of succeeding and failing. And understanding as a group, as a player, when is it okay to fail? When is it not okay to fail? Because remember, okay? Case in point, remember, let's say we didn't have these things marked, okay? Let's go back to our example, okay? Our character, this game doesn't have like barbarians and stuff, but let's say our character is this fiery, right, blue collar, hardworking mouse, right, and he's tired of dealing with all the. And here's this grain peddler. He's this bourgeois merchant, right, who already is making all this money off of the backs of innocent mice farmer. And now we suspect him of being a spy, and he's trying to bring down my hometown. All right. So my character gets up in this guy's face, and my persuader is not a 5. My persuader is a 0. I don't have any persuader, but everybody agrees, like, I need the checks or whatever. So I go up and get in this guy's face. I'm going to use beginner's luck. I use my fiery trait against myself. I'm giving myself all sorts of penalty dice, right? And now remember, the check is make a persuader check for the guy to come with you. And I could say, you roll the dice, you fail, okay, completely. Obviously, of course you do. But now, as the GM, the ball is in my court. It's the GM's turn. And this is something I like. This is something I love, I should say, about PBTA. In PBTA, Powered by the Apocalypse games, when you roll a 6-, when the players roll a 6-, the GM gets to make as hard of a move as they would like to. They don't have to. Now, they should still be serving their principles and their agendas. But as the GM, the player rolled badly. That doesn't mean that everything goes bad for them. What it means is the GM, I get to decide what happens. Right? It's a very different point of view. So when the player rolls badly in the GM turn and they fail, which they just did, I could decide, you know what? You make absolutely horrible arguments, but your character is so worked up about this and is so intimidating that the guy agrees to go with you anyways. You're going to succeed. However, getting all worked up like that sure gets you angry and mighty, mighty, mighty thirsty. And I give you, the mouse barbarian blue collar worker guy, 2 conditions. You succeed, but you get these 2 conditions. Right. And so that's like the trade-off. Now, as a GM, I don't have to do that. If I think it would be interesting to twist and go in a different direction, I could do that as well. But the point is the power is in my hands. When we're used to the thinking of the GM as being like always in charge. But in a game like this, that's not always necessarily the case. The GM, it's more like when the players roll badly, the GM gets to kind of step in and sort of do what they want to do. Rule of Cool asks, how heavy is the system on the prep part? I believe the game actually explicitly tells you to not prep for the most part. Pretty sure. I think it's like, I don't know if they have even a section here on prepping, but yeah, I don't think they do, but let's see what we got here. Let's see. Yeah, I'd have to look it up more, but like, I'm pretty sure that there's a section where they basically just say, yeah, so everybody notes a belief on their character sheet. You pick a mission, short and direct, a location, a duty, and a time frame. See designing missions. Here we go. So there's 4. You pick 2 conditions. It could be a rainstorm. It could be a weather. It could be undergrowth, fallen trees, swamps, quicksand, sucking mud. It could be owls, skunks, badgers, bats, right? And again, pick 2, and that's it. You go on to it. So now there's obviously nuance to this because again, you want to challenge them to be a hero. And this is something I think that is really well said here. But there's another level to it. It's not just that life is hard and duty is dangerous. We play to see if our guard mice have the necessary qualities to become heroes. These challenges test their mettle. They provide a chance for the players to prove their characters are hero. Being a hero is not easy in this game. You've got to risk life and limb, work hard, and sacrifice much. Heroes care. They want to make a difference. They want to succeed even when all hope is lost. How do we make sure the players care enough about the mission so that they try their hardest? That's an easy trick. Lean on the players' beliefs, interfere with their goals, trigger their instincts, and stomp on their traits. Okay? So this is kind of brings me over to the next part, which I really want to talk about here in our last bit of this deep dive. And that is the other side of the character sheet, okay? This is kind of more of the stats side of your character sheet, okay? So this is, your character's name, how old they are, what hometown are they from, what's their fur color, okay? But here in the box is sort of the three sort of hallmarks of this system. And that is your belief, your goal, and your instinct. Now, a belief is a statement that your character writes, that you write for your character, that intrinsically sums up one of their core, if not the core belief that your character has. It's about, making that statement of how strongly, how powerfully do you believe in your goal. And at the end of the session, okay, now this game doesn't have experience points, but what it does have is at the end of the session, if your character played up their belief, okay, they earn a fate point. And a fate point is kind of like a hero point, okay? But the way you earn them is by playing up your belief. And then you also have a goal. Each session, you are, after the GM describes what this session's unique challenge is, you have to write a goal that is unique to your character. My recommendation, I don't know if the book says this, but my recommendation is that each player writes their goal individually, okay? And doesn't necessarily consult with the other players. And then everybody kind of reveals their goals all at once. If you want to play really, 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 like kind of, I don't want to say cutthroat, you could have the players keep their goals to themselves. But each goal is obviously going to depend on the mouse in question. And if two mice have like very similar goals, you might ask them to be like, well, maybe how is yours a little different than his? Or how does she vary in hers? But the point is, this is basically your session goal. What is it that you're trying to do? So if somebody's session goal is, I don't really care about this grain peddler. I just want to make sure that my fellow mice make it to Barkstone. Okay, that's my character's goal. If I can accomplish that, I earn a persona point at the end of the session. Similarly, your character will have an instinct, something that you always do, right? Or something that you basically are automatically doing. And when that situation comes up, if your character, it's like, in the face of danger, my character always draws his sword, right? Maybe it's not the most appropriate time for that to happen. Maybe it's actually a disadvantage. But if you play into that instinct, you earn a persona point at the end of the session. And persona points are kind of like superhero points. They really allow you to potentially tap into your nature and have a really, really big dice roll. So, at a fundamental level, there's almost an element here of like Legend of the Five Rings, right? In Legend of the Five Rings, the idea is that your samurai has a giri, which is like their sworn duty to their lord, to their samurai master. But they also have their ninjo, which is sort of their heart's desire and what they truly want in life. And a big part of Legend of the Five Rings is just playing the different samurais' duties against one another and playing one samurai's ninjo against another samurai's giri, right? So one samurai's desire against another samurai's duty, and just watching the sparks fly. And this game is basically like what you want to get good at, what you want to sort of master is figuring out how to kind of fuck with your players and twist them up a little bit. So there's like a mouse guard GM sheet, And one side of it here is, a little bit of a cheat sheet for each of the characters. Okay. And you'll note it doesn't have like, what's their fighting skill? What's their health skill? We don't really care, right? What we care about is what is their belief, what is their goal, and what is their instinct. And so what I'm trying to do is, as a GM, why the game wants me to have this as a cheat sheet is because it wants me to be able to very quickly understand, what can they do? I mean, okay, there's a specialty thing. So like you can write down like, okay, what are they actually really good at? That way you can kind of have, some idea. But really at the end of the day, this is what I should be looking at. And when I think about a twist, when I think about something I could do, right? How do I play the mice against each other? How do I play the mice against themselves? All right. London. Yes, exactly. Congratulations. You played yourself. Right. But unironically, because I could challenge, I could take, player A's belief and I could, juxtapose it with player B's belief. And I could say, all right, you're in a situation, you both have strong beliefs about this. What happens? I don't know. It could also be a situation where one player's goal is in competition or is in direct opposition to another character's belief, right? Your goal might be like, I will bring this traitor to justice, right? That he deserves. But another character may have a belief which says everybody deserves a second, and then maybe in parentheses, and third and fourth chance. So now you have one character who is playing, they're doing what their job is. They're playing their character to the hilt, right? And they are trying to advocate for their character. They are trying to push for their character's goal. Their goal is, I'm going to bring this guy to justice, right? And, maybe the penalty for treason is death. But then you have another player who's also trying to play their character to the hilt. And they have this belief that everybody deserves a second or third or fourth chance. Well, they both can't be right? And the game it's a mature game. I'm not saying that like someone has to lose and someone has to win, but this is not a situation where like both people can be right. It's about making tough choices, and it's about characters compromising, and it's about understanding how characters grow and change, sometimes not for the better. And that's okay too. But that's where like, kind of the needling, the knife twisting a little bit, comes in. And why, even though this is a silly game about mice with hats and swords and cloaks, it could be kind of pretty mature storytelling. Super chat coming in from Johnny B. This game system is all about gaming the system. Yes, absolutely. John, as a Fate aficionado, this is in very similar ways. I think this game is very similar to Fate, where a lot of players, when I've played traditional D20 games with people who've played Fate for the first time, they really do not get the idea of, accepting a compel, right? Or using an aspect against themselves. Or even when they build their character, their aspects are all just like, super powerful upside with absolutely no downside. Yes, that's a cool aspect. That's what my character wants. Because the idea of playing a game to lose is very strange, because regardless, even though we say TTRPGs aren't about winning, the fact is 99% of TTRPGs, maybe not anymore, maybe now it's like 90% or 80% of TTRPGs are about winning. It's about your heroes accomplishing their goals. It's about winning. It's about beating the bad guys. It's about, finding victory. The game is not set up in a way to allow you to easily lose and not suffer terrible consequences for it, or just to feel bad about it. This is a bit of a game where you are going to lose, and the game is designed to sort of do that way. And so that does take a different mindset, because like I said, the idea of, why would I ever want to hurt myself? Don't I want to pass every check? Think about the mindset of a typical 5e player or the typical Pathfinder 2 check. How do I get my bonus as high as possible? Full stop. Full stop. I'm going to acquire every bonus, magical item, whatever. There is no world or situation where your character gets any benefit from failure, ever. There is no situation where your character gets any benefit from failure. There might be some weird one-off example that I'm sure somebody has, but for the most part, there's no advantage to it. This is different. This game is different. So it's not about just, winning. So again, this is the one side of the cheat sheet. And the other side of the cheat sheet is, basically everything that you need in order to run a session of Mouse Guard. Okay. By the way, there's little caveats in this game that I absolutely love as a GM. So let's take a look here. So by the way, this is conflict, which we did not talk about, but we start with a mission, choose obstacles, start with 2 of 4. So, we pick two obstacles. And by the way, a lot of times the obstacles depend on what season it is. This game has this sort of yearly cycle where you move through the spring, the summer, and the fall. And then the idea of the winter is your characters don't actually adventure in the winter. They're still mice, and the winter is just absolutely brutal, and they're probably going to die. So actually, after you've played through the spring and the summer and the fall, which might take you, a couple of sessions, the winter, you have what's called a winter session. And if you're familiar with Northern Reaches, you know that Aaron loves this idea, and so do I. And it's literally kind of like a bookkeeping session, but it's kind of like a montage session where it's like kind of one big player turn, and you get to do a bunch of stuff and work on a bunch of skills and have a bunch of role playing. And then we get ready for the next year. So it's very easy in Mouse Guard. In fact, it's built into the game that you will have the passage of years of play as you play the game. But so here we go. In the session, this is how we run a session. First, we declare the weather. We consult the weather by season in the seasons chapter. So we take a look at what season we're in, and we can pick what the weather's like. Okay, just to give the players the heads up. Then we note any new beliefs or instincts. Players update their beliefs and instincts. All right. So you can't do that in the middle of the session, but you can do it at the beginning of the session. And we would update that and note that on our GM sheet. Prologue. This is the rule I love. One player gives the prologue. Note what details the player remembers. His character recovers hungry and thirsty, angry or tired, or 1 point of his nature if it was taxed. We didn't get into taxing his nature, but basically if your nature gets damaged, it's called taxing it. So by being the player who steps up and sort of gives the prologue of basically what happened last time, you actually get a mechanical bonus. This is like part of the game rules. And then, a different player has to give the prologue the next time. So you can't literally be the same player over and over and over and over again who does it. But, you might only pass it between a couple of players. And you know what? The game basically says this person remembers. This person took notes. This person has a good memory. This person was paying attention. They get a benefit. The game is actually rewarding them for stepping up and giving the prologue. All right. The game also notes if somebody misses a session. All right. They can recover. They can regain a piece of nature, but they have to describe what happened to their character. In order to gain these benefits, you basically have to describe, hey, while you guys were off doing that mission with the grain peddler and, John missed that session. Okay, John comes back the next session. He missed that session. So he gets to kind of tell us, what was your fun adventure, John? Like, what did you go and do? Now, obviously, he doesn't get all the benefits of being able to level up his skills and all that other stuff. But the game basically does say, it throws him a little bit of a bone and says, okay, but you can have a little bit of recovery. But you just have to describe for us what you did that session. All right. Then GM's turn. So then once everybody's kind of caught up, the GM's turn starts, and it starts with the GM assigning the players a mission. So this is very, you are part of a military organization. So you assign them a mission via Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is the leader of the Mouse Guard. It could be a message that comes in from Lockhaven. That's the headquarters of the Mouse Guard. Or it could just happen organically from events from the last mission. Maybe the last mission sort of ended with, a disaster, and now the town's on fire. And obviously the GM's turn is you have to put the town out. Then after the GM describes the mission, each player takes that moment to write their goal for the session. And remember, that is going to go on your character sheet. It's going to go, here we go. You're going to write it down on your character sheet, and you're going to be playing to that because that's how you get your persona point. That's like your superhero point. Then we describe the first obstacle that the players have to overcome. And if the players fail, they still succeed with a condition, or we can twist and add a new obstacle. And what can we use these twists for? we've talked about these a little bit, but the book does go into detail about this. We can use the twists to introduce new obstacles which challenge the character's beliefs, to threaten their goals, to trigger their instincts. Remember, that's what I said. The game is at a fundamental level about the character's beliefs, goals, and instincts. So one of the things that you want to do as the GM is use these twists to challenge those beliefs, threaten those goals, and trigger those instincts. We want to see the players struggle with them and potentially accomplish them. We also talked a lot about this. Play goals against beliefs. Play beliefs against other beliefs. Play goals against goals. Make them have to pick. Make them have to choose. Make them have to fight it out, right? Make them have to decide. We can also bring in new contacts as obstacles. We can use enemies as allies. We can threaten their character, the NPCs that are part of their character's circle, their parents, their friends. And if the players succeed, we just move on to the next obstacle. So you can see, right? Success is boring. Failing is way more fun. Then the players get their turn, okay? And they can take their checks. Now, what can they do with their checks, okay? Number one, players may pass checks to other players. This is a really important rule because sometimes, and the game is set up in a way that if one player, if John, right, had, if John had 6 checks because he was kind of the star of the show and he was taking a bunch of traits against himself. If John has 6 checks and the rest of us all only have 1, John does not get to use all 6. So, in fact, a player cannot take a check twice in a row. So, in other words, if John wants to be able to use all 6, he's got to give some up. He's got to give some away to his other players. This, by the way, is brilliant because it means, let's go back to my example, okay, where my fiery kind of barbarian-esque mouse, right, was basically tanking a roll, but using it to trigger a check against himself. And now my character is going to have a bunch of checks. Well, that could be good for your character too, because your character doesn't have any checks, but now my character has like 3 or 4 or 5 checks, and I can give those checks out to other players in the party. In fact, I'm going to kind of be forced to do it. Otherwise, I'm going to have to throw them away. So even though the adventure is getting worse because I'm failing, I'm earning a check. And while that is good for my character, it could also potentially be very good for your character as well. All right. You can use checks to recover from conditions. You can buy gear using your resources skill. You can find new contacts and new allies using your circles skill. You can test skills to gain future bonuses. And you can even start conflicts, fights, chases, and arguments. Now, I don't think we're going to get a chance to get into this, but a big part of this game is the idea that, like, there's a meta. There's so much stuff here. There's the idea of this game is that players will initiate conflict, and not just with enemies, but with each other. Now, mechanically, this is something that is rewarded in the game. And we haven't really talked about conflicts, but needless to say, conflicts are kind of like the combat of Mouse Guard, okay? Where it's a little bit more procedural. It's not quite an initiative order, but you're going to make a bunch of checks. It's not just one die roll that covers everything, right? You have kind of a form of hit points. It's called disposition. The difference is conflicts in Mouse Guard can be conflicts about anything, okay? Conflicts can be conflicts about fighting, running away, convincing somebody of something, arguing about a philosophical belief, okay? So conflicts can be verbal. They can be combative. They can be philosophical. But one of the things that's really important about this game is that conflicts are binding. And that means that if you lose, or even if you win, if the other person got close to winning, you are honor bound to offer something up in that exchange. So what do I mean by this? Well, again, I don't want to say that there's a degree of antagonism here, but let's say that I don't remember who said this, but I don't remember who it was. But my character's goal is to bring justice or whatever, and I'm kind of being a jerk and I'm being like a mean to this person. And let's say that there is that other mouse. Let's say that it's Boothby's mouse. What's up, Boothby? Let's say that Boothby's mouse has as a belief everyone deserves a second or third or fourth chance. We get to town, right? Remember, my character yelled at the peddler, who we think is a spy, and my character wants to see him brought to justice, and my character wants to see him executed. Boothby has a check available to him. Maybe he has 2 checks available to him. He chooses to use one of his checks to start a conflict with me, another player character. And the conflict is, I want to convince your character that this guy deserves a second chance. And now we are in a fight. It's a fight of words. It's a fight of hearts. It's a fight of minds, of philosophies. But it's between 2 players. And the mechanics of the game are such that if I lose, I have to concede, essentially, and kind of do what this other character wants me to do. Or at least I have to rethink my position. I have to change my character's point of view, because I have been the game, right? It's a role-playing game. The game is creating the role-playing. I'm just doing my best to bring it to life. This is a very, very unusual thing. Now, the nice thing about conflicts, by the way, is it's a great way to roll a bunch of dice. And so conflicts can be really, really useful for picking up, a bunch of additional skill checks and additional, trait checks and all this other stuff, right? So there's a lot of advantages to being in a conflict. But like the point is that a character might start a conflict with an NPC, but just as often a player is expected to start a conflict with another player. And again, this is the player's turn. The GM, not entirely, is just sitting back twiddling their thumbs. They're still, answering questions and providing rules guidance. But by and large, the GM is out the game. It's not their turn. It's the player's turn. Now, Travis in chat is asking a question. He says, in that example, what kind of compromise would you offer? So what Travis is referring to here is when Boothby and I get into our argument, okay, and we get into this compromise, this conflict over, whether this person deserves a second chance. Boothby's character will start with a pool of hit points, for lack of a better word, that are called is disposition. And that's basically how strongly does my character, believe in the strength of their position. And my character would start with a pool of disposition as well. How strongly is my character in their feelings and in their position? They, one character might have more disposition than another. I should also note that like some of the conditions from our character sheets, like hungry and thirsty, give us a -1 to disposition on any conflict. Okay. If we're hungry and thirsty, it's hard for us to really be, focused in on what our goals are. Now, Boothby and I start playing these kind of rock, paper, scissors attacks and defense against each other. And that's the game. We're obviously describing what it means and what we're doing in character, and all that stuff is cool because that's why we play role-playing games and not just board games. But fundamentally, it's a mini game. It's a mini game. And we're using it to figure out at the end of this, does one of us break? And let's say at the end of it, my character, my mouse, is reduced to 0 disposition. So Boothby wins, right? So my character has been convinced. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's mind control, but my character has been led to see this new point of view. However, if Boothby loses some of his disposition, which hopefully, if I'm doing anything, he has, I lose, but the winner has to offer a compromise depending on how much disposition they lost. Okay? So if the if Boothby lost almost all of his disposition, he almost lost that argument. Okay. And in which case, the loser, gets to introduce a twist, or make the other person have these conditions, or potentially ask them to make a compromise. Like maybe, I say, okay, Boothby, I am convinced this guy deserves a second chance. However, I almost got you. I almost made you be convinced. And I think that maybe your character would change their belief a little bit. And while they still believe in forgiveness, they also understand that, some people are too dangerous to be let to live. And that, sometimes forgiveness is actually the worst thing that you could do, and so my character's been convinced, but now I'm asking you to change your belief. I want you to update your character's belief statement, because this conversation really affected you, right? Even though you won it, in winning, it changed you. And again, it's table talk. The game talks about this. The PDF talks about the rule talks about this. They call it like table chatter or something. Here we go. Let's see here. The player's turn starts with one player spending a check to bring his character into the spotlight. That player can work to accomplish his goal. It's his moment to shine. It's not your turn. What do? Well, you can contribute to your friend's turn. Offer to help. If he's stuck for ideas for spending his checks, make suggestion. If he's out of checks, pass him one of yours if you have a lot, so he can be part of the game. Table chatter is strongly encouraged during the player's time. It's okay to strategize a bit to ensure that everyone can accomplish their goals. But overall, even if your characters are feuding in the plot of the game, strive to be a helpful and contributing player. And this is just a great example, because somebody just today made a comment on our Root video from our Root actual play, which was not Mouse Guard, even though they're both anthropomorphic animals. But Root obviously is the Root RPG by Magpie, powered by the Apocalypse. And they were basically like, I can't, like, basically they were complaining about like the players being problematic because their characters were fighting. If you remember from Root, right? Literally one character tried to kill another PC. One PC tried to kill another PC. And I responded pretty quickly, but the point is, this person does not understand what they're talking about. The player had no problem with the other player. In fact, the players were both excited to be there. The conflict was between their characters. And, part of being a part of a collaborative storytelling game is understanding how to separate, the two of those. It even says here, perhaps, it says, perhaps you could even suggest ways for your patrol mates, that's the fellow mice, to get revenge on you for that failed pathfinding test that caused them so much trouble, right? Like the game is kind of encouraging you. In fact, it's saying you should speak up and be like, if you guys really wanted to, I did kind of fuck everybody over there, admittedly. And I mean, I can imagine that your guys' characters are feeling pretty salty about that. So, maybe this is a good opportunity for you guys to like screw me over and, whatever. And like, that's fine. That's good, because we're doing it together and we're all part of this whole thing. I said what gets rewarded gets repeated. So we talked about your beliefs and your goals and your instincts. So when the session is over, your session usually ends either after you've accomplished your mission and played out a single player's turn, or if the GM decides you haven't completed your mission, he can end the session. The last thing is to be rewarded. When the play is ended, go around the table. Each player reads his belief, goal, and instinct. I have played hidden goals before, and it's always fun to like learn what the other player's goal was. And potentially, if you succeeded at your belief, you get a fate point. If you succeeded at your goal or your instinct, you get a fate point. After that, decide who earned the MVP workhorse, and embodiment rewards for the night. Don't vote, decide. Then you're done. Go home or go get some dinner or sit around and talk about how awesome mice with swords are. So this last part here, the MVP, the workhorse, and the embodiment is specifically, this is like the end of session procedure, is talking about the fact, and again, it says, don't vote, decide. So at the end of the session, after you determine your beliefs and your goals, MVP is the most valuable player. It goes to the player who made that crucial contribution so that the patrol could complete its mission. The group as a whole decides who gets the persona point. Only one player per session can be the MVP. So this is a game where it says like, hey, look, we are calling your character out. You were the MVP. You did the heavy lifting this session. And you get, as a result, you get a persona point. Sometimes you have the workhorse character. This is the character who was never in the spotlight, but they had the right skills. They made good rolls all session. They kept everybody going, right? They had a help. They helped every single roll. All right. And again, one player gets decided to be the workhorse and they get a bonus persona point. And lastly, there is embodiment. This reward is for the player who best embodied his or her character during character's conditions during the game. So remember, we have those conditions: hungry, thirsty, thirsty, angry, tired, injured, and sick. So were any of them, when somebody had conditions marked, were they convincingly hungry or angry or tired? Okay. And did they use their traits against themselves or for themselves in a good manner? If our pseudo-barbarian mouse, really played up him being angry and, basically hangry, hungry, angry, he was fiery, and everybody's like, yeah, like your character really felt like you did it, man. You role played, you succeeded at the role playing game. Then your group might give you the embodiment reward. Okay. It can be rewarded to more than one player, but it can never be awarded to everyone. And if nobody captured their essence, it doesn't have to be given out. Okay. So again, this is the group, which includes the GM, but they're not the one in charge of this. There's not a vote. It's just a decision, and it's a talking. And, if you're like, oh, I really think they did a good job. No, I think they did a good job. It's like, okay, they both get the embodiment reward. I think as a group, we sort of have that moment. And again, it may not have been you this session, but that's okay. It's not every session of yours is going to be the game where you get the opportunity to really showcase your character or be the workhorse or be the MVP. But hopefully over a long enough period of time, you advocate for your characters, others advocate for you, and you will get those opportunities as well. Of course, I should point out that these aren't experience points. These are essentially hero points and superhero points. So, your progression in the game is not affected by this one way or the other. So without going too much into some of the other specific details, particularly the conflicts, which we did not really get into the conflicts. But TLDR, conflicts, you pick 3 actions: action 1, action 2, action 3, and you pick them in advance. Usually you use a deck of cards. It's rock, paper, scissors. Okay. Attack and defend go against each other. But if somebody defends and you feint, then the person who feints wins. But if you feint and somebody attacks, okay, then they win. The attacker wins. All right. And maneuver is just sort of like a setup for a bonus for the next action. And so the idea is it's really not that strategic. It's really not that tactical. You kind of just pick 3 things. I'm going to attack, defend, attack. And then the GM or the other player, if you're playing against another player, they pick their 3. I'm going to feint, attack. And then you flip over your first one and then you resolve it. And you make a test, and that could potentially affect the character's disposition. There might be some strategy to it. And to be honest with you, if I'm being completely honest with you, this is my least favorite part of Torchbearer. It's my least favorite part of Mouse Guard. It's my least favorite part of Burning Wheel. I do not enjoy the conflict system. And while I will use it, because you kind of need to in order for certain mechanics in the game to work, It's not that I don't like, oh, it doesn't have miniatures and 5-foot grids. That's not what I dislike about it. I just dislike that it feels kind of rock, paper, scissors to me. And I don't like that the feeling of strategy is kind of lost. That's what I don't like. I don't know that maybe there's people who have solved this issue. Maybe there's a bunch of house rules somewhere. I've never been so engaged with these games that I've paid attention to that kind of detail. But so yeah, and that's the game in a nutshell. Let's see. I think we have some example characters here at the bend. Let's see here. 38 and 276. Yeah, so here's an example of one of the characters that we've been talking about. Here's Kenzie, their birth year, where they're from, what their fur color is, what their rank in the guard is, their patrol leader, their color of their cloak, royal blue. So their nature as a mouse is 5. They have 5 will and 4 health. Will is basically your generic charisma, intelligence, wisdom, right? It's basically just your raw mental stat. And then health is like your character's raw physical stat. Skills are always very like, a technique, a specific thing. You use will and health a lot when basically no skill applies. But here's this character's belief right off the tin, right off of the game's box cover. Their belief is it's not what you fight, but what you fight for. Their goal is I must find evidence that will determine if the grain peddler is a traitor or not. And their instinct is to always consult Saxon, that's another mouse, when trouble arises. Then they have their skills, fighter, hunter, instructor, lore mouse, whatever. They have wises, which I did not talk about, but wises are just another way for you to give bonuses to other characters. And then they have 3 traits, calm, tall, and leader. All right. And a little bit of gear. And that's it. That's a mouse guard character. I mean, sure, you have the full character sheet with all the little circles for noting passes and failures, but by and large, this is a mouse guard character. So here's another mouse guard character. This is Saxon. Ooh, this is our fiery, stubborn mouse. So maybe we were describing Saxon. And we can see here that, his fighter skill is a whopping 6. Big. That guy's crushing it, right? His belief is that the best solution is always found at the point of my sword. So you could see a world where that belief is going to, run into other characters' goals and other characters' beliefs. Their traits are that they are short, they are fearless, and that they are bold. And then here's Sadie, and then here's Liam, who's just a young little mouse. His belief is that a guard mouse never gives up, no matter the danger. And remember, your belief can change, but it's not something that should just change willy-nilly. It should change because of the game. But by and large, you're going to keep your belief for a while. Now, your belief is going to be challenged to hell. The GM is going to challenge it. Other players are going to challenge it. But how your belief changes and how you defend it and how you change it is a big part of your character's arc and a big part of the whole game itself. The goal, on the other hand, is going to change every session. Each session, you're going to have a new goal. It's going to be specific to that session. All right. And in this case, this character is sort of the young paw, the sort of the tender paw, a young mouse. He's trying to show Kenzie and Saxon, the 2 venerable vets of the team, that I am a valuable member of the patrol. So that's his goal. So at the end of the session, he'll be rewarded if he succeeded in that. And then he's got a good scout, and he's got determined and defender as his traits. So, the characters themselves are not super complex, or I should say their characters are not super complicated, but you can come away with some really, really complex game play as a result of it. All right. We should have tried to work in more cheese puns. Yeah, not so much. They don't really talk about cheese because I don't really think there's dairy, because I don't really think there's milk. To the best of my knowledge, I know that the mice keep bees, so they have a lot of stuff made with honey, which makes me think that they would actually they probably do consume a fair amount of mead, but there's a lot of honey honey related stuff, but I don't see as much because they don't ever really mention cows or anything that any other sort of large mammal that you could get milk from. Like, I don't think the mice are milking. Although mice have milk, but I don't think we would eat mice milk. Anyways, weird things to think about. Travis says, I've struggled teaching the conflict system to new players. Yes, me too. If it's a chase conflict, the attack action is run away. It's very unintuitive. Yes. Obviously attack means you are trying to move towards your goal in a very straightforward fashion. In a chase, that means, running really fast, either to catch up or to run away, depending on which side you are. And so attack doesn't really mean attack, right? Attack means attacking your goal. But it is very unintuitive. Yes, it is very unintuitive. It's a myth. Mice eat grains. Well, no, the mice do grow grains and fields. I mean, the whole thing was a grain peddler. I'm just saying they also keep bees in the lore of it. There is also a beautiful box set available that has a map and some cool little tokens, some really fun, pretty dice with cool symbols on them. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's got snakes on them and stuff for the failures for the 1, 2, 3s and swords for the 4, 5, 6. But I don't know if the box set is first edition or second edition. I actually don't know the answer to that. I don't think there's a huge difference between first edition and second edition, so I wouldn't really sweat it too much, but I'm not 100% sure which edition the box set is for. But I've seen the box set. I actually don't own the box set. I own first edition. I own second edition. Anon is saying that the box set is second edition. Okay. It's very nice. I never bought it because I literally own both editions and it just didn't feel like buying it. But if I was like starting up a new Mouse Guard campaign, I'd probably buy it. It's pretty. It's actually pretty. And the map of the Mouse Guard territories that it has in it's really nice. And the dice are kind of fun. Although, again, normal D6 work totally fine. All right. Well, we had some really great support tonight. So I do want to say thank you to John for all the tips and super chats, to Sail Away, to Sorrel, to Ben Drawl for super chats and tips. Y'all are great. Thanks to anybody who is signing up to our Patreon. You guys are great. Have I talked about winter and seasons? Dan, I did talk very briefly about the winter session, about taking that time to... Hey, Travis, thank you. Cheers.
Travis tipped $3. Thanks for bringing attention to such a great game.
Yeah. And again, and I'll be honest with you, I've said this before, if the whole mouse thing throws you off, which I get it's not for everybody. You may want to check out Torchbearer. Torchbearer does a lot of these same things. It's not as deeply ingrained in the whole, like, challenging your character's belief, because you're a little bit more of like a D&D kind of murder hobo instead of this like noble knight. But I have seen, I think I've seen a hack online where somebody did, because the mice guard, right? Because like the mouse guard is it doesn't belong to any one kingdom. They don't actually have authority. Does that make sense? They are basically a self-funded, independent, third-party organization who basically just have vowed to defend the Mouse Guard territories. And wherever mice go, they will do their duty to try to keep them safe and keep them protected. So somebody, I remember, did a hack. This might have been back in the old Google Plus days. So it's entirely possible that it has been lost, as so many great RPG resources were when Google Plus fell. Somebody did a hack where instead of mice, you were Jedi. And I thought the idea of, traveling Jedi, being sent up on a mission by the Jedi Council and having to deal with objectives and overcome each other and having beliefs and struggling with the Force, I thought it was such a great analog to Mouse Guard, because, Mouse Guard are basically Jedi Knights. They have this moral authority, but they don't have any real authority, but everybody respects them, but not everybody necessarily listens to them. And for some people, they're more trouble than they're worth. And it's kind of this question of like, what real authority do you have here? It's not like you're some sheriff that was elected by this town. you're just a member of the Mouse Guard who shows up, and everybody gets that you're here to do the right thing, but also who the hell are you to tell us what the right thing is? So there's kind of like a fun play on that, which again, if that sounds like Dogs in the Vineyard, I think it's because it's supposed to sound a bit like Dogs in the Vineyard. I mean, this was a time and a place where, Vincent Baker and Luke Crane, all those guys were just, back and forth in all the forums, and you can go back and see that. So they were absolutely being inspired by each other, ideas. And so it's a really interesting concept. But again, if mice is not your thing, maybe check out Torchbearer. Although again, it's not quite as heavy-handed. And who knows? Maybe those old hacks are still out there somewhere. But anyways, thank you, Travis, for that. But yeah, Dan, we did talk a little bit about winter and the winter season and how it's sort of like a montage, and it's a great way for the time to pass. And when you go on a mission, it might be in the spring, and then depending on how many missions in the spring you play or how many weather twists you have, you move to the next season, summer. So it's a game where time can really pass. In D&D, you get these instances where people go level 1 to 20, and how much time happened in the game? 2 months. Mouse Guard's not going to be like that. Like every couple of sessions, every maybe 3 to 5 sessions, 6 sessions, you might have a winter session. And the idea being that that is more of it's kind of more of a role-playing, hyper player focused session. It's less of a GM session. It's more about the players spending the winter back at HQ and working on their skills, developing new traits, new interests, and pursuing their goals, which could mean challenging other players and challenging themselves and all sorts of other stuff. And it's it's a little bit of a bookkeeping session as well. And it's something that I find that people really look forward to. It's actually a really fun administrative kind of session. And it gives this really strong sense of time that I think is unique to the game. And I think does it really well. Anand says losing G+ was almost losing the RPG equivalent of the Library of Alexandria. Everyone scattered to different nations and the community never recovered. It's all very, very deeply depressing. Listen, I was big on the Google+. I mean, this was this was the early days when I was first getting into indie RPGs. This was when, Blades in the Dark hadn't even come out yet. Apocalypse World had come out. Monster Hearts had come out. Monster of the Week had come out. And I was, just starting to get into that stuff. And it was everywhere. It was on Google+. I remember reading early alpha drafts of Blades in the Dark from John Harper on Google+. And yes, all that knowledge will be lost like tears in rain. Winter Court in the Imperial Palace. Absolutely Callimachus. I think that Rokugan works in the same way, right? Winter is pretty tough. It's pretty rough in Rokugan, and you really can't go to war, and you can't farm. And so what else are you going to do? Everybody holes up. Everybody, before the weather gets too bad, all the important people send other important people to each other's palaces, including the Imperial Palace. And actually, technically, it's the Imperial Court, which is hosted by one of the clans at Acuidan. But there are other winter courts, right? The Imperial Winter Court isn't the only winter court. And then everybody stays there. They're guests for the winter. And everybody just does politics and writes treaties and arranges marriages because there's nothing else to do. And it's no use to going to war. There's no use planting anything. The weather's too bad. Traveling would be suicidal. So everybody just hangs and died. Now, of course, in Rokugan, they use that to scheme and politic and backstab and plot. But in Mouse Guard, we use it perhaps a little differently. But maybe not. Maybe you use it to plot and scheme as well. But anyways, very cool stuff. All right. Well, let me know. Let me know. If you're a patron, let me know if you thought this was an interesting deep dive. If you'd like to see more of it. Historically, whenever we do a part 2 of a deep dive, it always does terribly. But I don't really care what YouTube likes. I really just care what my patrons want. So let me know. We might do a follow up. Certainly there have been a couple of games where we've done multiple deep dives, and those are games that I particularly love or that my patrons were particularly interested in. So one of the advantages of being a patron is, of course, that you can go onto the Discord and you can talk with me and convince me of why I should talk about your game next. This is a unique game, and it really stands out, and it does a lot of things differently. And it was, I think, for me, personally very influential in the way that I kind of look at role-playing games and understand them. Like I had read, Powered by the Apocalypse and Apocalypse World and stuff before, but this was like the first time I really read a game and I understood, because I did read this game, admittedly, before I read Burning Wheel. So this was my first exposure to Luke Crane. And it was eye-opening for me, the idea of what else RPGs could be, right? And it really changed the paradigm for me. And that was, for me alone, just such a immense eye-opening experience. And now we take for granted because there's so many different RPGs out there. But back in 2008, when this came out, no, you had, 3rd edition D&D was, obviously on that way out. 4th edition D&D was about to drop, but there was not even a Pathfinder yet. There was no Apocalypse World. There was no Blades in the Dark. There was no OSR movement. It was like you had 3rd edition D&D. You had the White Wolf people, and then you had the weirdos playing GURPS still or something. Like it was a much smaller RPG market, and so this game was for me a big eye opener. So, well, let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. If you're not subscribed, please do so. We just reached 12,000 subs this last weekend, so that's cool for us. It's not like it's a particular milestone, but up, onward and upward. In another couple of years, maybe we'll reach 20K. We've slowed down considerably, but who knows? Maybe 6th edition D&D will come out and we'll really love it, and then we'll turn strictly into a 6th edition D&D channel. We'll never talk about anthropomorphic mice or 2 billion year into the future cyber numeneras, and we'll only talk about D&D, and then we'll blow up and we'll be one of the most successful successful channels on YouTube. But I sincerely doubt it. Last super chat coming in from Bendrell. Thanks for the great stream as always, Bendrell. Happy to have you. Thank you again for the incredible support. Have you thought about doing a deep dive of any of the Star Wars systems from over the years? So let me be honest. Number one, I have never run a Star Wars game. I'm fairly well Star Wars knowledgeable. The Star Wars game that I'm actually the most probably familiar with is Star Wars Saga Edition from Wizards of the Coast from like that 2008, 2009 era. I don't really know the West End Games D6 system, and I don't really know the Genesis system that well. I know the Genesis system in general, but I don't know the specific Star Wars Genesis system as well. And I don't know of any other Star Wars games, but I've always been hesitant to do a deep dive on any of those, Bendrell, because it's just never been a game that I have really explored. I've always felt very strange about Star Wars or even Star Trek as a game, because I feel like those IPs are just so strong that it's difficult sometimes for me to imagine carving out a space for the player characters. And I even have that problem with like Dune, where it's like, how do you set something in Dune and not have it end up being about Paul Atreides or Leto Atreides? How do you run something in Lord of the Rings and not be like, meanwhile, in the background, while Frodo and Sam and Aragorn doing all the important shit, your characters are over here defending some other important village that's not actually that important, because the only thing that matters is Frodo delivering the ring. So anyways, like, I guess my point is like, I mean, obviously there's a lot of people who really like Rogue One, the movie, but I was not a huge fan of Rogue One, the movie. I'm not going to get into it. I will say the Battle of Scarif itself was really, really awesome. But I was not a fan of the movie in general, because I was kind of like, well, I already know what happens here, and whether they live or die doesn't really matter, because I know that they get the plans to Leia, and I know Leia gets the plans to the rebels, and I know that the rebels blow up the Death Star. So watching this doesn't seem like it really is all that important, or it matters that much. But I digress. In fact, what you're seeing is just a bunch of tertiary characters who are doing stuff to set up the main characters, right? And that's what I always worry about when you play in an IP is it's like, oh, this is the, like if you've ever played like Star Wars MMOs, it's always like, oh, you're going to go get the crystal that's going to go into Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. It's like, I don't want to be Luke Skywalker's bitch. Like, I want to be the main character. Anyways, I'm just getting off base. But anyways, thank you, Bendril. That was a long rant for that, but I appreciate you for doing that. I'm happy you got to be here. Where was the Sunday bonus Fate stream? I'm pretty sure I know we've done several Fate streams, Papa. I believe we have. Unless I missed something. My patrons usually let me know if I missed something. But yeah. We do have some stream goals coming up though. We have we're going to start our AD&D campaign setting deep dive series. We're going to start with Birthright. Maybe this week, maybe next week. So we got that coming. And then I have to check the list. That was the one that I know. Yeah, you know what? And this is the only reason, shout out to the Old Republic, right? Like that is actually an era that I would play in. I would never play in an Imperial era. I would play in the Old Republic era, or I would play in what's like the super namby-pamby, super soft. They just started making a bunch of YA books for it. Is it the High Republic series, where it's like, the Republic when it was like at its zenith or something. I'm totally on board with Star Wars: The Old Republic. That would be where I would want to play. But then you're right, and maybe people are fine with that. That's totally fine. But like, then you're not. Then there's no X-wing, and I'm not a super Star Wars nerd, so like I don't know everything in the canon, but it's like part of my baseline knowledge of Star Wars is like Empire, clones, stormtroopers, Ewoks, Jabba's, X-wings, TIE fighter, Star Destroyer, this is my lexicon. So when you're like, oh, it's 5,000 years ago, all that stuff doesn't exist yet. And it's like, okay, so how is this Star Wars? Well, it's got the Force. Oh, okay. And it's got the Sith and the Jedi. Got it. So it's Star Wars, just Sith and Jedi. Anyways, so like, I'm not trying to knock it. I do think it's fine. I think it's cool, but right. All the things that there's merchandise of. That's the only thing I know. If there's not merchandise for it, don't know it. It's nothing that I know. Currently playing through Jedi Survivor. I assume that's a video game. And I feel that so many little things are just a wink, wink, just like oh, did you see that? Oh, get it? It's just like from the movie. Dan coming at me with the fucking 10-ton questions. Dude, I have no idea. I get a headache just thinking about it. I have no idea. I mean, part of it would just be figuring out a way to remove the, the randomness of it. The Hutts exist, the Wookiees exist, but that creates another problem with the Old Republic. 5,000 years ago, us humans were just inventing like writing and agriculture and like making some of the first stone, buildings that would exist, right? We've advanced a lot in 5,000 years, to say the least. I find it incredibly weird when you play Star Wars: The Old Republic and it's 5,000 years in the past and you're like, wait a second, this technology all seems the same. Are you really telling me that 5,000 years ago they had droids that went beep, boop, boop, beep, beep, boop, and 5,000 years later they have droids that go beep, boop, bop, beep, 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 boop? Like what? What? That doesn't even make sense. Okay, so they had ships that could zoom around and go to hyperspace, and 5,000 years later, the ships zoom around and go to hyperspace. Like, it's one of those things where I'm like, am I just supposed to assume that apparently nothing happened in 5,000 years? It's very strange. Now, Michael, this would absolutely, the problem, well, I don't want to get into the Butlerian chat. Obviously, we would totally prepare that, yes, that no books were ever written and that Frank Herbert died, and the Dune series was ended with him, and there was never anything else written by his son or by Kevin Anderson. But yes. Am I excited for that Player's Handbook 5e cover, says our good friend Steven. By the way, Steve, we're like a month out from Origins, man. Player's Handbook new 5e cover. This tells you how much I pay attention. 1 hour ago, it just came out, huh? All right, bringing it up here. All right, let me bring it up here. All right, I'm going to pop it up. Window capture, DD image. All right, so this is apparently the new cover image for the D&D 5th edition Player's Handbook. Wow, it literally says the world's greatest role-playing game up on it. Let's take a look. Do I like this? I mean, my instinct is to say yes. I kind of love everything about this. The characters are a little bit more, anime-y than I would probably traditionally say. But like, you've clearly got like the wizard, the dwarf, maybe like the elf cleric is over on the left-hand side. You've got the fighter, the paladin. The sword looks really cool. Wearing like a very old school helmet. Not really sure. It must be a rogue or something behind him. So it's like a classic party. The dragon is an interesting choice. The dragon has kind of like kind of almost like a gold dragon Asian style influence to it, which I think is a little unusual for sure. Not what I would traditionally expect to see on a book, but I don't hate this. I think this art's pretty cool. They're obviously in some sort of cool dungeon, which obviously, look, they're in a cool dungeon. There's a dragon. I mean, what else do I want? Yeah, I think this is cool. There's a technological S-curve, Derek. Okay, well, fine. But still, it was a long time ago, though, right? There are other art pieces. Look at the one with the cartoon characters all grown up. Art. Do I have other one? I don't know. I'm just getting mine from. I guess I have to go to. Do I have to go to Game Informer? Yeah, I guess I do. Oh, that's actually kind of cool. Hold on a sec. Look at that. That's pretty cool. So you can very clearly see, right? Like the ranger, and there's the Bill, or what's his name? Not Billy, but the little barbarian, and oh God, what's his name? It's not Arturo, but I can never remember the nerdy wizard guy. And then the thief acrobat with her pole. Although I guess the other characters died. Where's the rogue with her invisible cloak? She's not there. That's pretty cool. I like this art. Yeah, I mean, again, I think that this, I think this cover art is pretty good. Yeah, there's more of like a wider view of it. Tiago says she's invisible, obviously. Well, you know what, buddy? You are absolutely right. How silly of me for forgetting that. Yes, her hood is up. There, the back. This is the back cover. Features an unknown party of adventurers flying into danger on the back of a bronze dragon. I will say that this art now. Okay, this art kind of gets us there, but this art to me feels a little bit more traditional. This art feels very, very, very Mighty Nine Vox Machina to me. This has very strong Critical Role vibes. I don't know why, but the nature of it, the tone of it, the characters, their expression, the way everything is going. It's very Critical Role like to me. At least that's how I perceive it. Like the white haired axe guy, that's clearly Travis's character, right? The laughing bearded gnome guy thing, right? That's clearly Sam's character. The flying uber badass wizard, that's clearly like Liam or Talisman. And then, that you got the two girl characters, and that's like one of the, like, I don't know, maybe the one in the back is Ashley or something, or Laura or something. It just has a very strong, like Vox Machina, Mighty Nine, whatever the hell the new one's called, vibe to it, in my personal opinion. I could be wrong. But yeah, here's this sketch progression. I like, by the way, that now everyone's so obsessed with not being called out for using AI that like the artists themselves have to basically like prove that it wasn't AI. And then the company that is using the art now has to prove that what they used wasn't AI. It's kind of crazy. This art I liked. I mean, I thought the detail in the shield was really, really good. Oh, there it is. There's this guy. I mean, look, I think there's a lot of really interesting things about this piece of artwork. I'm not going to lie. I think this artwork is amazing. Like, this dwarf is a badass. I love that he's got this like sword, this short sword. He's got a bow, right? Like a lot of stuff like we traditionally, although, as a dwarf, he does have an axe hanging on there in the back just for good measure. But he's in a castle or some sort of fortress. I love the detail on the shield, the runes, the shield boss, and the shape of it, the cuts. I thought this was really cool. I love the detail in his armor. I thought this was an incredible piece of artwork. Loved it. Looks like he's maybe crushing some undead or something. I thought that was great. You know what though? The thing about it is, like, I don't want D&D to be about brand identity. I want D&D because it's not about their characters, right? It's about your characters. Quick aside while we're talking about it, this is one of the things I don't like about Pathfinder. I think Paizo is stupid. I think them using their iconics is dumb. And they put their iconics on the cover of all of their adventures. And it's like, hey, look, you can go see Valeros and Kyra and Merciel go take on this adventure. It's like, no, I don't want to see them take on the adventure. Isn't it about my character? I don't give a shit about your iconics. I don't want to think about your characters going on this adventure. I want to think about my characters going on this adventure. And I don't like them using the iconic art for that exact reason. I think it's a terrible decision. I've never supported the idea of the iconics. You know which iconics I liked? I was okay with, I guess. Maybe the PAs, no, not even the Player's Handbook 3rd edition ones were pretty forgettable. A lot of people don't even remember them. But like, I don't feel like they got used as much as Pathfinder iconics do. But I wasn't even a fan of the 3rd edition iconics either. So, yay! It's a dragon! Yay! A silver dragon enjoys the adulation of a city's parade route. All right, I guess. I don't really know what that's supposed to be. This dragon art is okay, not my favorite. The new look for the bronze dragon. Bronze dragon is actually an underrated dragon. The metallics in general, just woefully underutilized. I think they're so cool. So yeah, I don't know. I think the art's okay. I don't hate it. I've always been very torn about the 5th edition art. But yeah. I feel D&D the game has never made the characters feel as cool as this art presents them. Well, okay, Dan, there's some truth to that. And part of that is, okay, because look at this image. All right, look at the image of this badass dwarf, right? With his axe slung at his side. He's kicking ass. Arrows are sticking out of his shield, right? He's got his bow. He's got his little hair, bound back in a ponytail. Look at these people going off an adventure, okay? There's like a hint of it on this like purple elven kind of looking character here in the bottom. Where's the 3 weeks of rations? Where's the 3 weeks of rations? Where's all the stuff? Where's all the crap? Where's all the equipment? Where's the hundreds of scrolls and the potions, right? Characters should look like they're long distance hiking trail packers with the amount of equipment that people carry on them these days. So yeah, we call him Flint Rock Tubo. He's a dual wielding feat in archery, which was, by the way, a feat in Pathfinder 1. Do you have a favorite art style that represents an addition from the past? We did an entire stream, Kudragas, on art. So if you go and look on our channel in our live stream about art, I cover everything there. But long story short, Jeff Easley, Larry Elmore are basically my goats. In fact, actually, I have still yet to get it mounted. But I actually have a print. So this is from Jeff Easley. This is the first edition Player's Handbook. This really cool wizard guy who I used to thought was just like the bomb. So this is a piece of artwork that I bought. Got him to sign it. It was pretty cool. So I still gotta get it mounted. But another one I have is a piece from the second edition Player's Handbook. It's called Dragon Slayers. I'm proud of it. It's probably my favorite piece of art. Definitely go into detail about that in the stream, but I also got that print as well. Hold on, now I got to put this thing back. Hold on a second. All right. Anyways, so yes, I do, but you know, that is that. Boothby's issue with not feeling cool is, in my opinion, the dwarf is surrounded by crushed enemies and has arrows in him. Awesome image that would take 3 hours of combat to get to match that scene. And again, we're already over time here, but whatever. That is actually one of the things that I've heard time and time again when I have run Dungeon World for people. And I run Dungeon World pretty fast and loose. It's a PBTA game. But one of the things I will do in Dungeon World is, you know, we have gotten so used to, we are locked in on this idea that, right, one attack roll is 6 seconds of time. It's literally 1d20 roll hitting the table is one swing of the sword, right? It's one arrow through the air. And Dungeon World completely shatters those ideas. And so, you know, we'll be playing Dungeon World and, you know, I'll describe that, you know, the door on the other side of the, you know, there's a raging battle going on, and the door on the other side of the battle, which has been getting kicked in, suddenly shatters. You know, bits of stone and wood go flying in as a horde of orcs comes pouring in, or a bunch of goblins come scurrying in, you know, with wickedly curved, blackened, rusted, pitted blades and black slick armor, hastily thrown together, their green skin slimy in the torchlight, flickering torchlight, and they begin scuttering and, you know, coming down the stairways, and a couple of them leap down off of the banister and landing. And I'll ask the player, I'm like, and what do you do? Right? That was a soft move. And the player will say, you know, I basically charge, I rush in, and they'll make their hack and slash roll. And I will like just describe, because it doesn't matter like the mechanics of it. Like what matters is that they rolled high, so something good happens. And I'll describe them like coming in and they just like, you know, immediately block 2 attacks with their shield, and then they take their fist and just punch, you know, one of the creatures in the jaw, and they hear the neck snap and it falls to the ground. And then they kick another one back as they push back, slashing their sword out of its sheath. They slice one across the belly, reverse their grip, fall to the ground, and bury their sword in the chest of another one. And they're like, holy shit. Like, and it's weird because, like, you know, you rolled the dice and like, so your dice roll made that happen. but it's like I just described like an hour worth of combat in a lot of games for you to be able to do that many things, and you got to do them. And it's very, and I know it's like, oh, you're just making it up. Yeah, but also no, because there are mechanics to PBTA games. And so like it's a very interesting experience, but yes, that is a random side tangent from that statement. Yeah, Brom's great. I think I talk about Brom in that stream as well. I talk about some of the stuff from Dark Sun, which I also loved as a kid. All right, well, almost 10 o'clock, so just about an hour over, pretty good for us. So yeah, let me know in the Discord if you're a patron member, and if you're not a patron member, maybe we'll see you there about Mouse Guard and any questions you have or follow-ups that you want to ask. And who knows, maybe we can get enough people interested. We'll get some community games going, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and people can maybe start playing through some Mouse Guard campaigns. I think that's all I've got. Thursday, we're going to be back. I don't know what the stream topic is going to be. Probably leave it to the patrons to vote, as I tend to do for Thursdays. Next Tuesday should be the premiere of our first Knights in Exile series, which will be Knights in Exile EverQuest, where me and Smith take Bob through his very first MMO, and what better game to choose than 1999's EverQuest, and watch Bob tilt off. And it'll be fun because instead of me tilting off, it'll be Bob tilting off for once, and that'll be a very fun change for us. But we're going to run that for a couple of weeks while we get everything set up over Smith's house, so that on Tuesdays we can get back to doing some of our group live things with me and Smith and Bob and Mike's, and having it sound good. But instead of being at the studio, we're going to be at Smith's basement, aka in Exile. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody. Peace.